Okay, good to go? Okay, great. Good evening. This is the May 24, 2022 regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission of New Canaan, Connecticut. Before we get going, this is a hybrid meeting. Lynn, if you could briefly inform everybody how you run the meeting, please.
This is a hybrid meeting. Those of you on Zoom, if you could just keep your picture off if you're not speaking at the podium. Only the commissioners have their pictures on. If you're here to speak on a specific topic, if you're in the room, when it comes to that particular docket, we will open it to those in the room first and then those on Zoom second. If you're on Zoom, when you're asked to speak, if you could just raise your hand, it would be helpful to find you.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. If anyone is here or on Zoom for 119 Clearview Lane, that application will not be open tonight. We expect to open the application on June, then our next meeting, June 28th, 2022. Roll call, John Goodwin, I am here. Ken Turner.
Here.
Dick Ward.
Here.
Dan Radman.
Here.
John Chris.
Here.
Claire Tiscornia.
Here.
Kristen Wilson.
Here.
Arthur Cassavant.
Here.
John Engel.
Here.
Chris Herring.
Here.
James Bash.
Here.
Paul Connect.
Here.
Okay, great. We have a full house. Okay, we'll go into the public hearing. Item number 1, 485 Laurel Road, upon application David and Deborah Pudding, Pondweed LLC, owners for a special permit of sections 34C3, 34C6, 34C7 to allow a detached accessory dwelling unit located within the front yard in which structure will exceed 1,000 square feet of building coverage in the 2 acres residence zone at 485 Laurel Road. Who's here to present, please? Yes, sir, kindly step to the podium. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dave Pruding.
If you can explain your application to us, sir, tell us what you'd like to
Okay.
do. And
I'm the proud new owner, along with my wife, Deborah, and my son and daughter-in-law of the X-Town Farm. It encompasses 2 parcels. It's a total of 17 acres. History research tells me it was initially built around 1780 or thereabouts. It's a spectacular property. I came to purchase it in September of last year. Unusual circumstances led me to look at it. Kind of an unusual sale in that the owner, the prior owner, had invested heavily in the property, infrastructure. I think there's 5 wells on the property, built a sterling cottage, 1-bedroom cottage, or renovated it on parcel, the second parcel, I don't know if it's A or B, but that's 500 Laurel Road across the street. That's a 1-bedroom finished cottage that I currently occupy with my wife. The main house, which I'm permitted to renovate, and I'll explain in a moment, as well as the existing garage with an apartment over, were both framed to be rebuilt and stopped. So structurally, both buildings have been completely redone. The exterior of the main farmhouse that you see as you wind along the road is meticulously finished. The paint, it doesn't need repainting, and it's probably 10 years old. That's what's bizarre. And then you walk in and it's raw. It's bare studs. So we're permitted to finish the main house. There is a purview by the HNE, the Historic New England. At some point, one of the prior owners, it might have been the Finleys, deeded that purview to the HNE. So we're in touch with them. There are limitations on the renovation, what can be done and what can't. That basically they want to preserve some elements, historically significant elements of the property, of the house. So The special permit, as I find out, is required because our setback of the existing garage, first of all, it's important that I tell you that the building is 100% complete. We're not adding anything to the building. We're renovating the exterior, replacing windows, siding, typical remodeling features, interior changes to the floor plan. We are adding a deck on the back of the building. And that was one of the questions that the planning and zoning wanted clarification on, that did not encroach on any setbacks, which it clearly doesn't. And I brought substantiation in the form of site plans updated for that. So our plan is to complete the work on the garage apartment so that we have additional space for our family to use. Namely relatives visiting from out of town, potentially my son and daughter-in-law, and might occupy that garage as well down the road. But it's part of the old renovation of the entire property. So that's my intention. And I understand that the special permit is required because the renovation is over 1,000 feet. The principal level on the second floor of the garage is on or about 1,000 feet exactly. The height requirements, we've satisfied that with documentation that we do not exceed the 25-foot height maximum or the 15-foot on the second story. So I think we've substantiated that with documentation from architects and civil engineer.
Questions for the applicant?
Some questions. I believe it's like a historic preservation easement or something that's on this property that you were talking about, historic.
Yes.
Did they have to approve your plans
Only for the,
exterior?
no, only for the principal house
Okay.
and only half of the house. That's what's unique. The original farmhouse has been modified over time. In fact, there's an interesting tableau showing the different buildings over the several hundred years that the architect assembled. But so there's an older part of the house, then an entirely brand new L wing to the main house. That has no restrictions. In fact, there's very few restrictions on the renovation of the original farmhouse. Namely, it's preserve all the wood floors and the fireplace surround, which we would have done anyway. So we're not in any way constrained by their requirements. And as far as to answer your question specifically, the garage is out of bounds.
Okay.
This is John Chris. Sir, just to be sure I'm clear on this. So the renovations are all interior renovations you're talking about?
It is, and exterior in that replacement of windows, siding, cosmetic, and basically to match what's there, no radical changes. So it is an overall reconstruction of the building.
So the exterior changes are not increasing the size of the building. You're not adding a story. You're not doing a
Absolutely
bump out
nothing.
or
There's no
anything
change
like
to the
that.
exterior with one exception. There is a deck being built off the back. There's a beautiful meadow that you drive by, bordered by, can't think of it, the Soundview Lane. So there's a deck you'll be able to sit out and view that meadow. But other than that, there's no changes structurally or physically, other than a refacing of exterior siding, windows, etc.
okay. So the renovation of it's actually the old poor farm in town, believe it or not.
Yes, it is, yeah.
And so these are historically sympathetic to the rest of the building.
Am I?
No, the changes you are suggesting or petitioning for are sympathetic to the rest of the style and heritage of the building.
Well, most certainly on the main farmhouse. This garage apartment, it's basically one room, almost this size. And it's divided into 2 bedrooms, you know, a little kitchenette and a bathroom. Pretty fundamental, nothing elaborate whatsoever. So it'll be pretty much a Chevrolet, no disrespect intended.
Could you provide a bit more detail on the deck you're intending to install, types of house design, size, building materials?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pressure treated lumber for the most part, most likely, I haven't done it yet. May look into some cedar. 8 by 36, the footings are already there. So this was approved at some point. The entire project's been through iterations of permits. The original permits expired. I think they were approved around 2008 or 7, back that far. And then they're expired. So I had to start the process over. So the deck is attached to the rear of the house. I have photos if you'd like to see it. I'd be happy to grab that.
Thank you.
Hello, it's Kent Turner. Oh, I'm sorry.
And just a second, please.
The rear of the house.
We'll need to submit these two for the official record, so pass those to my colleagues.
Mr. Chris, any other questions or?
I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Turner.
Yes, good evening, everybody. I believe the architect has done a very good job of enriching the existing building, and it's going to be a very handsome renovation. I'm just kind of curious about a bit of maybe a missed opportunity. If you look at the elevation, the 2-story building on the right, and then there's a 1-story utilitarian garage. It's they're kind of forced together. It's not a happy, compatible building as such. And you are doing such a nice job on the filigree and the detail. Did you ever think about maybe adding a dormer or doing something that ties the 2 structures together a little more harmoniously?
The question directed at me.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
There are 4 doghouse dormers on the front of this building. I don't know if you can see it. Doghouse dormers mean miniature like those. The rear, keep it simple. Keep it simple, shed the water. That's my opinion.
Well, my question really was the structure on the left, the 1-story garage.
All right,
The back looks fine. The structure on the right is a nice gesture. But when you look at the front elevation with the 2 of them together, it's, I think, a missed opportunity. And my question was, did you think about maybe adding more to the building on the left, the garage, so that it was more of a compatible, one unitized, one complete structure?
the answer to your question is yeah, I have thought about it and my wife and I have discussed it. It's a big flat roof and seems to be, potentially a 2nd story could be added, but we've got our hands full with the main house renovation and this as well in terms of economics and time. So at this time, we're not contemplating that.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
I have a question on the use. According to the planner's notes, you're here because of changing it to a accessory dwelling structure, but based on the demolition plans you have in here, previously was an accessory dwelling structure.
It was. Yeah, there was an apartment there.
So you're not changing the footprint, you're not changing the height or the scale or expanding the square footage, and you're replacing in kind with what was there previously, granted slightly different interior design. Are we voting only on the encroachment into the setbacks, or what are we, why is it here?
So we couldn't actually find a special permit to allow for the accessory dwelling unit. Under today's regs, you'd require an accessory dwelling unit to have a detached one, to have a special permit. So for all intents and purposes, we sent them through to get the special permit. So,
But if there's no change in square footage, there's no
so
change
then
in
it would,
use.
right. So then you would actually even, it could almost, the use could almost be legally non-conforming. So then it would now conform because it would get a special permit essentially. So
So make it conforming, I guess. Anybody else?
It's not going to be conforming. It'll be a non-conforming situation with a special permit.
Permitted by special permit.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Would anyone from the public like to address this application? Lynn, let's check Zoom land, please. We good?
does anyone want to speak on this application? That looks like a no.
Okay, great. Okay, as I noted at the beginning of the meeting, we will not open 119 Clearview Lane tonight. So we will move on to 158 Forest Street and 160 Forest Street, which will be heard together. Application dated Rucci Lampert Tui, authorized agent for special permit of section 32C, 64G, 64I8 to construct a detached two-family dwelling. Allow grade in excess of 1,000 cubic yards and soil disturbance in excess of 10,000 square feet, and allow a slope greater than 4:1 in yard setback at 158 Forest and 160 Forest. Application dated Rucci Lampert Tui. Authorized agent for a special permit of sections 32C, 64G, 6418 to construct a two-family dwelling, allow grading in excess of 1,000 cubic yards and soil disturbance in excess of 10,000 square feet, and allow a slope greater than 4:1 in yard setback at 158 Forest. Mr. Rucci.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, hi.
Yes, sir.
485.
Hold on.
485 Laurel is officially closed.
Oh, did I not close it?
You did not officially.
Oops, thank you for that. 485 Laurel's closed.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chris.
Good evening, David Rucci, Lampertine and Rucci. If you recall, last meeting, we were here speaking about this particular application, and there was a number of questions that came up from the commission members as far as additional things that we should be looking at as far as development on this piece of property. So what, those were essentially talking about the loom of the property on the front. If you recall, the site parking, how that was going to work. Mr. Turner had a question about lighting. There were some questions about screening and the native plants there, some questions about the materials as well. And then there was a question from the town planner, sort of like the legal authority as far as non-conforming uses, parcels, structures, and the like. So we have today Doug Cutler, who is the architect on the project, and Barbara Wilson, who is the landscape designer on the project as well. Rob Frangione, I believe, is on Zoom. I can report that Rob did submit his plans to Maria, an engineering who did approve them. I think I want to say about 3 or 4 days ago. That should be in the file. I'm sure Lynn, the town planner, can confirm that as well. But I think the first thing I want to talk about is the loom, because that was one of the questions that came from Mr. Radman, I think, and also Mr. Engel. So then, this is the location map that you're looking at. It's the first in your, just to give you kind of a idea of where we are on this. And then if Lynn, you could just go to the next slide after it says loom. And I think one of the first question really was there any opportunity to move this backwards, move it further away from the street? And we did look at that particular issue. And what ended up happening there was we really took away a lot of the site parking from the back and the way that we could do a turning radius from the fact. So what we did do, though, is we brought the building down 2 feet in the front. So the first slide that you're looking at there shows how the building has actually dropped 2 feet. And it's no larger than it is today on the site as far as the height itself, albeit it is closer to the road. And you'll see that, where the elevations are and where they are from a height perspective in that slide on page 5. And then if you go to page 6, you'll see sort of the new design. And the one thing that we did pick up was sort of some more fieldstone. By dropping it down a little bit more, we were able to get more fieldstone in and around the garages, as shown on A5, both from the front elevation. Remember, the garage is sitting in the front of the property, not unlike a number. I didn't count how many were on 4th Street that were built that way, but there's quite a few where the garage actually is in the front of the property, and you sort of come in through the garage and then move up through your homes on the particular street. So you'll see also, as we just kind of move through 7 and 8, this is just showing how the height moves down. You know, that's obviously something that we have to put into the record to be sure that this gets documented with what you all are looking at. If you go to slide 10, I'm just sort of getting to some pictures here. This is showing sort of an overview of what it looks like now with this building in the front, how it's come down a little bit in the front. And another one of the questions was, you know, what was the street view going to look like and how was it going to look? And this is why we showed this particular piece of this particular picture. And if you go to the next picture, number 11, sort of a side view from the street, from the other side of the street. And you'll note here, this was something that Mr. Radman was mentioning. Was there any way that we could get, you know, some sort of additional, like maybe a little bump out area or a little parking in the front of the particular property? We did look at that design as well. And if you just go to the next slide, Lynn, I think after this one, maybe another one, actually, number 13. 14, sorry. Back one, please. That one. So instead of sort of the little bump out, which we thought was a little awkward, we did try to show a design that has the parking in the front, or at least a little area in the front where you could kind of pull in and out, which made it less awkward for that particular garage door there. And if you go to the next slide, it's not inconsistent with some of the other parcels on Forest Street. There's one that was recent. I don't know how recent that was built. I think it's Valenti's house. And you'll see even in the house that you're looking at there, they have that front cutout area. And even if you look up top, you'll see those condos above it also have the parking sort of sitting in the front with the property more back, you know, in the rear. As we move along, the next slide, please, sort of get to the site parking. This was something that you wanted to look at. I actually have some better. So this is it's just a larger copy. It's much easier to read, and you'll see the first page is with one parking spot in the front, and the second page, sorry, that one. The second page is where we put in an additional one. I think it might be easier to read than this. Google Docs. Now, so you can see here, there was some talk, Mr. Radman and Mr. Turner, I think we're looking a lot at sort of how the flow of the parking was going to work up and through this particular piece of property. And we were able to, there was a question as to whether in the back of the two-family in the front lot, whether or not they were going to sort of be crossing over into the rear lot. And we've been able to now manage that where you won't have any sort of crossover as far as easements go, et cetera, you know, trying to get from one lot to the other. So the purpose of this particular parking layout is just to show you how the parking is going to work. When we have obviously the ones in the one that only has one parking spot in the front, just the garage, you know, we have 9 spots. And then if we're able to add an additional parking spot, we get a 10th spot. And it's also important to note, you know, Forest Street, you can park on the street in and of itself. You know, you can't park overnight, but obviously if you have people that are coming to visit, et cetera, there's plenty of parking for guests, et cetera. When you're, you know, for these two-family developments.
What's the only difference between top page and the second page is what?
Is there's a parking spot now in the front. So instead of having just the one parking spot where the garage is, there's like a cutout to the right. That's the only difference in those two particular properties. I don't know if you want to ask questions as we go through this or whether you want me to just finish and we come back to it.
Mr. Rucci, you can keep going.
Okay. So the next section that we wanted to look at was the lighting and how the lighting was going to work. And one of the questions was there going to be any spotlights on the particular piece of property? And if you go to the next slide, please, Lynn. I think it's 18. I'm sorry, 18. Thank you. So you'll see here, we're just representing to the commission that we're going to have one light above each door on the garage doors. There's going to be 2 wall lights on the front doors. The French doors will have a single light. If it's a single French door, obviously they're double. They'll have 2 lights on the doors. There's going to be no spotlights. We're obviously going to limit everything to less than 60 watts on the particular piece of property. As far as screening goes, we've developed another, if you can just move on, please.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
On that parking, just for a quick question, the slide you had number 14 where you showed the picture of the sort of bump out for parking. That bump out looks as though, at least from the picture, it looks as though it's probably twice as wide as the garage itself. Is it intended to be possibly for two-car parking, or is that bump out just a?
I think it's just, it doesn't look, it should only be for one. It's
Just for
only gonna be
one.
enough for one, but you're right, it does look almost bigger than the whole entrance to the garage there, but I think that's just the way it's
Okay.
been put on the slide.
Thank you.
Then if you could skip to 20, please. Page 20. So then we go to screening, and there was questions about the screening and native plantings, and Barbara Wilson's here. If maybe I'll ask Barbara to come up just to talk a little bit about the screening plan and how she came up with this particular plan, because there will be questions I'm sure that I can't answer. So this is Barbara Wilson. She's our landscape designer.
I just have to clarify, I'm a licensed landscape architect. Anyway, Barbara Wilson, I'm a native of New Canaan, and I helped to create this alternate planting plan, trying to address the comments that you wanted to have more native plantings. So what there are now is along the north property line is going to be a hedge of eastern hemlocks. These are evergreens that grow quite tall, but they can be pruned to keep low and to provide the privacy between that and the adjacent property. Also, there's going to be Rose Bay rhododendrons in that first building. You'll notice in the back where there's the rear entrance. So those will get to approximately 12 to 15 feet over time. They're nice and evergreen and they have nice flowers, but they are native. There's a stand I've seen in New Hampshire that's native. Down here in Connecticut, I don't think we've ruined all our forests and the deer have eaten them. But anyway, so those should be wonderful. So everything in that side of the house, first unit is evergreen. We're also going to put a native shad blow along the driveway entrance. That's that single tree in the green blob along the driveway as you come in. And in the backyard, we're remaining with the evergreen southern magnolia. That is the only plant out of the 26. So we have 25 native shrubs out of 26. And behind that now, we have American cranberry bush, which is a low flowering shrub. It's not evergreen, but it does get to about 8 feet, 9 feet eventually with nice white flowers this time of the year.
I'm encouraged by the changes. Thank you.
Hey,
Nice list.
since you're up right now, any questions on landscaping?
Okay, well, thank you
very
so
much.
much.
Okay, David Rucci again. The next picture is just, there's a question about what the sort of stone walls are going to look like. It's going to be your traditional field stone. And just a picture for you all to see what we're proposing in that particular walls on the property. And then I think the next thing that I wanted to talk about was 158 in and of itself in the back. And you recall, this is the two-family in the rear of the property. It sits on the property line. It violates not only the property line, but it also violates the second story height on the particular piece of property. And what we're going to, if you go to the next slide as well. And there's the second building that's there as well. And I'm just bringing up because Ms. Nielsen was asking about basically the legality of having two buildings on the site, three buildings on the site versus having one two-family building on the site as well. So I'm just showing as an example here what these two families right now that we already have two particular buildings on the property. And the way they're going to look, if you go to the next slide, is that's essentially what they're going to look like as you come up the driveway. If you can go to the next slide, please. That's the rear of them.
Mr. Rucci, what's the change in square footage?
For these, it goes from let me see, I had it in my last presentation, so just give me 1 second here. Okay, unit 3 has a footprint right now of 1393 square feet. And I think you could, Jeff, do you have that? Yeah, what does 1393 and 1160? What is it right now? What is it right now? Around 7. Okay, so the total is about 1709 right now, and it's going from 13, and then we're going to add essentially 1300 and 1100. So that's 2500 roughly.
Got it. Yep. Thank you.
Is that, just to follow up on that, this is Chris Herring. I'm just looking at the drainage summary report and it says that it'll result in an increase of 4,000 new impervious area compared to the previous. Are you talking footprint versus impervious area?
Just the footprint of the buildings. So not the drives itself. Because that will obviously increase in the impervious area. I think Rob Frangione, if he's on, can answer any of the questions with the engineering. We did get that approved a few days ago from Maria at engineering as to she had no issues with the way the drainage was being done, other than she wanted to be sure that easements were put in place if there was obviously water coming from 158 to 160 to the street, which of course we would have to do because it'd be crossing one property to go to the other.
Well, along those same lines, and maybe Rob could talk to this, is, you're increasing the impervious space by 4,000, and then are you planning to add a pool or other hardscaping in the back? And is there a restriction on that?
There's no plans to do any other improvements. One of the reasons we wanted to keep the two buildings separate instead of making them one is to create more green space for the entire project, for all 4 of them. Well, 4 units, 3 houses actually altogether with the 160 and 158. But the main reason was to keep green space in between them and not put more improvements onto the property. And those are not planned by this applicant at this particular time, no. Nor do I believe there are any plans for it. Once we, if we're fortunate enough to get approval, obviously, we're going to create an association amongst the 4 of them so that there'll be shared maintenance agreements, shared driveway agreements. So they're going to kind of all be working as one lot per se between the four different owners of these units.
Thank you, Mr. Rucci. Appreciate that.
This is Rob Frangione. Do you want me to answer that question about the imperviousness?
Yes, please.
Okay, sorry. Again, for the record, Rob Frangione, Frangione Engineering. Apologize, I'm coming to you from Danbury High School. I'm also the Buchanan High School boys track coach, and we had our county championships today. The increase in impervious area is about 40, what I said in the report, 4,600 square feet. But that was if we treated the pervious asphalt driveway as, quote, impervious. In reality, the sum of the pervious asphalt driveway is about 4,600 square feet. So if you were to subtract that pervious asphalt driveway out, it's nearly a wash as far as coverage goes for impervious surfaces. And as Mr. Rucci mentioned, Maria Coplet, the town engineer, has reviewed all of this and signed off on the drainage design.
Thanks, Rob. Chris Herring here again. And so I was reading your drainage report, and it's really nicely written. Thanks for adding all this detail. It's even for a layman, it's easy to follow, which is great. So I see you point out this idea that the project employs a low impact development technique, which I guess dovetails into Mr. Rucci's commentary about green space. So what I'm seeing here is that again, it seems like you're using some sort of asphalt that has some sort of permeability to it, and you're running the leaders underneath the asphalt to get absorbed by the gravel versus keeping it on the asphalt to run down the driveway. Is that the way to think about it?
Yes, so the pervious asphalt, it's completely pervious. So the water goes straight through it into the gravel. Likewise, the roof leaders, there'll be level spreaders from the rear buildings that will go into that gravel reservoir and allow the stormwater to infiltrate into the ground beneath it. We've done test holes to demonstrate that we have the clearance above ledge or groundwater or any restricted layer so that we can get infiltration. So we're the low impact development techniques are using pervious pavements, infiltrating runoff using pervious pavements, protection of travel paths, things like that.
Okay, and I see the rear deck is a deck versus a patio, so that seems also a way to have perviousness. Okay, thanks for that question.
If you can go to the next slide, please. I'm sorry, go to 28. So with the question that came up from last hearing from both the town planner and from Ms. Nielsen, at least at that particular point, was, well, why can't you do it with one unit versus two? And the answer is, well, we could obviously do one building with two families in it, but we chose not to do it based on the fact that we thought the design was poorer it was poor as to what we were trying to accomplish with both lots, meaning that we're trying to create sort of a community back here with more green space. If we have to take the building and put it together, which is, we just hand wrote this out, obviously, because we didn't have the time to, do the entire architecture, engineering, et cetera. You would essentially have less parking. That would be, we'd lose a garage. So you'd have less parking. You'd have more parking outdoors rather than indoors. And you'd have sort of a little bit more convoluted design in the back there, because the buildings would have to sort of come up front in order to hit the driveway the way that they're hitting them now. And the green space would all end up being in the back of the property rather than in between the two particular pieces of property. So it wasn't that this design wasn't looked at initially by the applicant. We did, honestly, it's probably a little cheaper to do it this way if you wanted to. But the whole design is, it makes the entire area better in our opinion, in our applicant's opinion. We also probably lose one parking space in this, because we do lose a garage space with a design like that. We brought
Mr.
this
Rucci,
in.
I have a quick question on this.
Yeah.
One. Did you consider, I know this is just a hand sketch drawing, obviously not fully designed, but what about turning it clockwise 90 degrees so that it's not kind of cutting off the green space for the whole site? But
Yeah, I can let me let the architect talk about how, or Jeff, if you want to come up and talk about the different designs on there. Okay, this is Douglas Cutler. He's the architect on the property.
Yeah, Douglas Cutler Architects. Yeah, we looked at the other methods. Being built into the hill, we can get parking, underneath one of the units. So that's one of the advantages. And then just from a family point of view, it's nice to have some privacy for each of, the owners. And, I think the suggestion in the state law that to have an accessory unit is being encouraged. And I think in the spirit of that, I think, separating it out from that point of view is also a plus. We try to work with the grade. I can articulate the front as well, because we had to depress the building into the ground. I think on page 7 or slide 7, our first floor is actually below grade. So we're going to have to waterproof that section. So, we tried to deal with the hardship of the slope as best as we could. And we can make some further improvements by tweaking some of the berm up against the stone wall, which, we can work with the landscape architects so we can soften that that front view on the front elevation.
Is slide 7 the house in front, or is that?
Well, slide 7, I believe or page 7 shows a side elevation. And the side elevation, if you look at the forward building at the rear, the finished floor of that unit is actually slightly below grade in the rear.
Mhm.
So we have to address that with waterproofing and so on.
But my question was regarding the back too.
Oh, yeah, well, the back, no, I was just trying to reiterate and cover some of the other points. But no, I mean, I made those points about, with the parking being built into the grade and giving some extra space back there.
This is Jeff Sandreuter. I'm the owner. To address your question on the back, the reason why we didn't turn it around the other way, like rotate it 90 degrees, is then you take all the green space away from all the living space within the buildings. So instead of right now, the way the buildings are in this other option is you're looking out on the green space, where if you tilt them 90 degrees, you're looking north and there's hardly any green, there's not a lot of green space there. So with this option, we think it's the best because although it cuts off kind of the green space from the front 2 lots or units, it still provides, nice backyards and green space for these 2 units. And that's really the main impetus for why we provided this option here in this manner.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So if we can just move to page 29, please. So just getting back to the rationale, additional rationale behind it, we just thought it was a better architecture design. We thought the access was better for the green space. It did allow more garage parking opposed to the outdoor parking. And when we talked to, and I think another thing is that when you have them together, obviously you have windows then looking at, all you're looking at is their other unit. When you have separate houses, you're actually looking out into other things. So there's also the design, I think, element with living in the houses and what you're looking at. And we also went to the fire marshal, who would rather have the buildings separated than not having them separated. He said both are fine. He said, but if it was my preference, I'd rather have them separated. And there's a note in the file on that. And there's also something in the legal opinion that I wrote into the file last week. If you can move, please, to 31. Actually, let's just go past that. Let's go to 32. So I think 2 of the questions that came up from the from town planner is essentially, here we have 2 things happening. We have a lot line change, and then we have the rear of the property going from 1 2-family unit to 2 separate units. So those are sort of legal questions as to, you have non-conforming uses on the property, you have non-conforming structures on the property. What gives you the right to do a lot line change, and what gives you the right to do the 2-family the way that we have it separated in the back? And so we're going to talk a little bit about non-conforming uses today. Essentially, there's 3 things with non-conforming uses. You have a non-conforming structure, you have non-conforming use, and you have non-conforming parcels. Okay, so there's three separate things within the regulations. If you have a non-conforming structure, you're not allowed to expand that non-conforming structure without permission from either this board or from a ZBA board, okay, depending on what you're doing. With a non-conforming use, it's the same thing. You have to make sure that you keep a non-conforming use the same. You can't expand it. So I couldn't go today from a 2-family use on this property to a 4-family use, if that was even required. So what's happening in this particular thing is, so I'm going to talk first about parcels, okay, because the lot areas themselves, because that's what this lot line has to do with. The question came up as to whether or not by changing the lot line, have you actually done something that's now different to the non-conforming parcels that you have on the property. If you remember, non-conforming parcel on 160 in the front is like 8,000 square feet. We want to give some of the property from the rear to the front, give it more lot area. So it's becoming more conforming. We're going up in lot area, and that particular parcel in the front's being more conforming. We're not doing anything with the rear because the rear has plenty of lot area. So they're able to give property to the front. So with lot line change, it's doing exactly what you're supposed to do with non-conforming parcels. You're supposed to make them better. So by doing the lot line change, we're making it better, okay? There's an argument that, well, as soon as you do that lot line change, you've actually created new lots, okay? And that just doesn't follow, because if that was the case, we were actually creating a new lot per se, then you could never, ever make a non-conforming parcel more conforming, because you wouldn't be allowed to do it, which is in opposite to what the regulations allow you to do, because the regulations want you all the time to make lots more conforming. And there's people on the ZBA board, who I know have been on the ZBA board here, that's what you're always trying to do. You're trying to make either a lot, a structure, or a use more conforming. So in the lot line example, if you look at page 33 of your shape, it essentially says that we're not increasing any of the non-conformities because, the proposed lot line change is authorized because it does not increase any of the non-conforming conditions on the property. It doesn't. Yes.
If I could translate this into English. for me.
Yes.
So you currently have 2 lots. The rear lot is conforming
To lot area
to lot area, not usage, but lot area
and to usage.
and the usage. But the lot area itself, the footprint of
Correct.
the lot is conforming. The front lot is not conforming.
Correct.
What is now the front lot that's non-conforming will remain within the pro forma lot you are suggesting, but make it a little bit bigger. So you're going to add something to it, but the current dimensions will be fully fittable, untouched into the new lot you are requesting.
Correct.
And that extra real estate will be taken from the conforming rear lot. And even with that piece lopped off and allocated elsewhere, it's going to remain a conforming lot.
As far as lot area goes.
As far as lot
yes,
area goes.
Correct.
Okay, and that's the line you want to redraw.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Sorry.
Can I just interject though? But
Yeah.
isn't there beyond lot area, what makes a lot conforming is frontage, the lot diameter circle, and those things aren't being met. On either
They're
of
not
those
being met,
lots.
and they're not met today.
Right.
They're not met. So there are non-conformities that will never be met, no matter what. They can't be changed. Lot area can't be changed. I mean, it can be in the front, but you can't change frontage because the frontage is always going to exist. So neither of these lots have frontage. Neither of these lots have the circle diameter in it, and they never will, because they're legally non-conforming as to those 2 issues. But what is happening here is that the front lot is getting more lot area, and becoming more conforming. The front lot is moving into a position where right now it's on a variance, and you won't need a variance anymore with the additional lot area. So it's becoming more conforming from that perspective. The rear lot, which is in the setback, in the height setback, is going to become more conforming as far as structure goes with this change. So you're bringing basically all these non-conforming structures to become conforming, okay, which they wouldn't be today. And that in and of itself, we believe is inappropriate from this board's perspective. They have the ability to allow these things to happen because as a board, we're here to get rid of non-conforming uses, so long as they're not more objectionable. That's like the other thing. If we were doing something that was more objectionable, then this board could be like, yeah, well, that's great that you're doing that, but this looks worse. And maybe that's what you come out with a lot in the back. Maybe you say, you know what? Yeah, we see that you're making these two particular separate lots. We think it's worse. Like we find that more objectionable than less objectionable. And that would be a decision that this board could make. They could say, we don't like the way it looks in the back. We'd rather you just put in the one building and put two families into that building. And that's something that we would be fine with because that's what you have back there right now. You have one building with two families in it. If you can go to the next page. So this is talking about essentially if you have like sort of any sort of uncertainty within the regulations, this board has the right to correct any sort of uncertainty. Like, yeah, we think that there's an issue. Like I know like later tonight, there's going to be talk about, you know, patios and how those particular things work. Well, the board can look at that particular issue and say, well, you know what, that's really not what we meant, or there's some uncertainty between the two things. We can make a decision to do something different, or that's exactly the way it should be. And there's no uncertainty. But I'm just giving you that section 1.584 because that's something that you can rely on when you think there's uncertainty within the regulations to whether you can do something or not. Next page, I'm talking about the less objectionable. You know, we believe by adding area to the front lot, it's less objectionable. We're making something more conforming. And then we'll get, if you go to 36, we're back to this two-family detached house. I know we sort of touched on it a little bit before this particular, we've gotten to this particular section, but it's the same issues that we had before. We believe that you actually have three structures in the back. One's a small shed in the corner, but you have two structures already back there. You have the house, which is in the setback, and you have the garage, which is in the middle of the property. We're still going to have two buildings. We're still going to have a two-family use there, whether the buildings together or whether they're apart, it's still the same two-family use. We believe that that is less objectionable from the perspective of this board as far as an approval on the two buildings versus the one building. And then the next page. When Mr. Goodwin talked about this a little bit as far as like, are you actually like expanding that second structure because, you know, you've made it a little bit bigger as far as the square footage goes? Well, under section 7.13, you're allowed to do that within the B zone. You're allowed to have a non-conforming structure be enlarged with the permission of this commission.
Fire commission question, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
This speaks to the single building versus two separate buildings. Has the fire commissioner also opined on the adequacy of the ingress and egress to the rear lot for safety equipment?
Yeah, his particular what he said, and I think it's in the legal, what I sent you for the legal opinion on what we're talking about today. But he basically said both designs work. He said, but he would rather have the two separated because he can get to the rears of buildings easier by having them separated. And he also made the point that, you know, obviously, if you have a building that starts a fire, it immediately gets to two families rather than to one, which is coming, obviously.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's sort of the end of that non-conforming use issue. I mean, and I know that, you know, the town planner and I have disagreed on it. I put a legal opinion into the file. I believe it's accurate. I believe it's correct. I believe you can rely on it, or I'd submit all those things to you. You know, she says in her memo, it's splitting hairs a little bit, but this board has the ability to look at these particular things and make the decision as to whether or not adding lot to the lot area in the front is less objectionable. Having two detached units in the back is less objectionable. That is something you're able to do within your regulations. That's what we're asking you to do. And we believe you're well within your rights to do so legally in that particular, in our particular proposals.
So it's James Sebastian. Quick question on the rear lot.
Sure.
Do you know whether in terms of determining the denominator for affordable housing, whether that denominator for what you're doing in the rear lot is going to change between 1 unit versus 2 units?
It's a good question. We did look briefly at affordable, and honestly, and I don't mean this with any disrespect, it was really hard to figure out the regulations. Like, it was really hard. I tried to go through it. I spoke with Scott Hobbs over at the Housing Authority. And it was honestly a little just too confusing for us. I can't answer the question. I still don't know.
Okay.
And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I know how hard you guys worked on it, and I wish I wanted to go in with that and use that reg.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't, I couldn't get a handle on it. So I apologize. I don't know the answer to the question.
Mr. Ritchie, this is Krista Nielsen again. So I know in the past, I know you referenced last time, the planning subcommittee had some conversations about attached versus detached 2-family homes. And I would say the overall sentiment was not wildly in favor of the detached. And in fact, I myself, when I drive down Seminary Street, sometimes cringe at what I see that we have approved on that street. That being said, in this case, I actually don't find it super objectionable because it is in the rear. And so it's not visible from the street. It's not necessarily breaking up the pattern of homes along the street because you can't really see it from the street. And I do think the arguments you're making in the site plan for this site are very logical, but I'm still caught up, and obviously you've gone to law school and I have not, but on the legal aspect of it. And the piece that's confusing me is that we do allow detached 2-family homes in the B residence zone if the building has side yards of at least 15 feet, which this does, these will. If the required parking spaces are behind the front lot line, which these will. And if the lot has continuously contained 2 detached single-family structures since prior to 1969, which it hasn't, or the lot contains at least 15,000 square feet, which it does, has a lot width upon a public street of at least 100 feet, which it doesn't, and contains a lot circle diameter of at least 100 feet, which it doesn't, and that the commission may determine an appropriate separation between the units. So I don't see in there where we have the ability to say, this looks really good and we like it, but it doesn't meet our rules. There's nothing here that says the commission can override this section of the regulations, as far as I can tell.
Well, I think that the way that I looked at that particular section, and I read it the same way you did, was that since we still have a non-conforming use in the back, and we still have a non-conforming structures in the back, that we're not changing any of the uses in any way, shape, and we're allowed to use that non-conforming use, the 2-family, no matter what in the back. Like, that will never change. And by putting it in one building, is that really expanding a non-conforming use? In other words, like, to your point, we have it in one building, still 2-family, still non-conforming use with the 2-family. What's the difference between having 2 separated units in that particular case? Because it's still the same. Everything's still the same. You still have the same use, you still have the same access, you're still getting rid of non-conformities. So my position would be that you're always allowed to do a non-conforming use in forever, so long as you have one. And I think it's less objectionable within the regulations to have the separated 2 families than it is to have it in one structure. Because I'm never going to make that. I'm never going to be able to get that in the back, right? Even today, I can't do that in the back. I'm still legally non-conforming in the back, no matter what. I can't get the frontage. I don't have it. I may be able to get the diameter in that back lot. I might be able to do that. It's pretty big. I probably could, but that's never going to change. Whether it's detached or attached, it's never going to change.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that the commission doesn't need a portion of this 3.2 CB to say that the commission can, by special permit, allow exceptions to when we allow 2 detached 2-family homes because that's non-conforming, and therefore under the non-conforming regulations, we have the ability to do it that way.
That's what I'm saying. So long as you don't find it less objectionable. So long as you can make that determination that it's not less, because it's never going to change. I never can get lot area. I never can get, I'm sorry, I never get frontage. I may not be able to get the diameter, but it doesn't change what's going to happen in that back lot from a non-conforming perspective.
Was it less objectionable or more non-conforming? We have to find that it's not.
Well, I guess that's the question. I mean, you could make the argument that, well, we think that having two separate units is less conforming. I hate saying more non-conforming, but less conforming, right? And you could make that argument, and that would be a legitimate way to look at it. And that's why we've tried to come up with some rationales to give you to say, well, we don't think it's less, we don't think it's more non-conforming, right? Because we think it's actually a better design all around. And if, as a planning commission, you're like, you know what, we like it better this way anyway, this gives you the ability to do it that way. If you thought, wow, they're really like overusing this lot, it's too narrow to the point down on Seminary Street, I don't want to see something look like that again, that may make it more, less conforming. So yes, that's the right analysis.
Additional questions for the applicant, the team?
I had one final one. Just to confirm, looking at the pictures, for example, in slide 10, there's a wall along the street as well as bordering the driveway and foundation and so forth. They all look like field stone, just to verify this is all actual stone for this unit as well as the other units you are petitioning for.
All field stone on all units.
Will be visible.
Visible.
Real actual rock.
It will be real actual rock.
Thank you.
Okay, this is Commissioner Cassavant. I have a question. The existing units, are they all rental units?
Right now, yes.
And in the anticipated outcome, will these units be sold, I believe?
Most likely. But it depends. I mean, the applicant now rents them. So I think it's just going to all depend on what the market looks like. But that'll just be a decision when we get to that point.
Now, to continue the discussion about conformance and lack thereof, in effect, what you will be doing then is taking rental housing and creating for sale housing and creating an event of capitalization for the owner of the property by making these, if we accept your argument, Mr. Ritchie, that they're less objectionable, but you are providing a substantial opportunity for capitalization and potentially creating an association that may make future applications to make additional changes to the property.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's obviously, yes. I mean, we could sell the whole unit development to someone else and not really know what they're going to do. All I can say is that at this particular point, this applicant has rented them in the past. I think his preference would be to sell them, maybe not all of them, maybe keep two, sell two. But it's a possibility, yes. I mean, I don't know if that necessarily goes to it being less objectionable, more objectionable, because I don't think you can ever really, no matter who comes in front of this particular board or commission and whatever they're trying to do for their own use at the time, they can always do something different or sell to a different, party at that later date. So
I agree with that, except for the fact that you're asking for an extraordinary approval, arguing that you're making an improvement in quality. So I'll ask one additional question. Have there been comments from the neighbors about this proposed?
I've spoken to 3 neighbors when we first filed the application, all of which who live in the neighborhood, all of which who've been there for a number of years. And they have liked the proposal. One of them wanted to buy one of the units and asked if they were for sale or if they were for rental. I mean, this area of Forest Street is sort of a hodgepodge of older homes, rentals, some single families. I mean, for the most part, we did an analysis on one of the documents last time around. it's probably between condos and two families. I would say there's more of those than there are of single families in the neighborhood. But that was on one of the slides, Mr. Cassavant, in the first presentation. So it's kind of an eclectic neighborhood. I mean, there are all sorts of rear lots back there. There's long driveways that go back to single families. There's long driveways that go back to two families. Some of them are two families that are not necessarily detached, because that's kind of a newer regulation that we've been allowed to do. But some of them are all in one building. Others are sort of more in a condo type setting. Like if you go back to the picture that I showed with the front parking, you could see one of the units back there. That was sort of like a horseshoe type of property. But you know, I understand what you're saying. I don't think it's an extraordinary ask, though. I mean, we're taking away a number of nonconformities on this particular piece of property, you know, 5 or 6 or 7, and making this lot more conforming. And in general, that's the way that all commissions are supposed to look at these particular issues. All town overlays plans, we want to make things more conforming. We're always trying to move to more conforming, not less conforming. So, you know, we're going to make this more conforming, and we're asking to do it in a way that doesn't take away any of the, you know, some of these things will always be non-conforming. We're never going to have lot area. We're never going to have frontage, no matter what we ever do on this particular piece of property. It's not possible if we're going to keep the 2-family use. So,
Right, but so while I agree with everything you said, when I drove this property after last month's meeting, and the street taken to another logical extreme, as opposed to granting more closer to conformance, but still not in conformance, one could argue that the community would prefer a use that says make it a conforming single family, right? I recognize that your owner would probably never do that, but the logical chain there is also plausible. So the question from a community point of view, and I agree that the renderings improve the quality of the neighborhood quite substantially, but I am a little bit concerned that we will end up adding 4 units to the denominator, actually, or adding at least 1 unit potentially to the denominator for affordable housing here without the creation of any affordable housing units.
we still have 2-family units. They're both still 2 families right now. So I don't think we're adding anything to the denominator.
So all 4 units you believe to be currently counted in the denominator?
I do.
Affordable housing. Okay, thank you.
I do. And that was the question?
Ultimately, yes. I mean, my first question about creating a for sale property as opposed to rental properties was also part of that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, they're still considered 2 families, even though you can buy a separate unit of a 2-family.
Okay.
So, James Sebastian, Mr. Ritchie, would your argument stay the same if this property was sold to a developer and the developer came back and they came up with the exact plans that you're presenting in front of us today? And this developer made the argument that, you know, I developed these lots in a less non-conforming or more conforming way. Would your argument stay the same in that situation?
I'm sorry, if they made it less conforming?
Yeah, would your argument stay the same, that we're still keeping in with the spirit of you should always be moving to more conforming or less non-conforming uses, and that's why this is an improvement versus what's existing? Would that argument still hold water if this was sold to a developer who came up with these exact same plans?
Yes, because so long as you're moving from non-conforming to conforming, whether it's a structure or whether it's a use or whether it's a parcel, for sure, like that's exactly what we're trying to do. Not me personally, I mean globally as a town, you always want to move to more conforming, because there's nothing else you can do. Like there's no other way to do that unless someone's willing to do it. I mean, technically right now I could leave that the yellow house. I could renovate it right in its spot. Okay. And that's already on the setback line.
Yeah.
You know, that's,
So what I wonder, and I think it's probably up for deliberation later, is whether or not if it was to sell to a developer and be brought before this commission, whether at that point we would want single family usage
Mhm.
or something that's materially different than, let's just say, consistent with all the conforming regulations that we have. And so then the
Yeah.
argument becomes contingent on, does the transaction itself make a difference? Whether it's an existing property owner or a new property owner, is that what can potentially change the argument between this is fine because it's going to a less objectionable non-conforming use or not?
no, I don't think it does.
I don't think we have that authority.
Okay.
We can't tell the applicant what we want them to do with the property. You
Or to
have
rent it or to own it.
to rent it or to own it or condo it or whatever. It's 2 lots. They're making a positive step forward to make it less non-conforming, which is all we ask, right? The applicant could choose to combine the 2 lots into a single. They could choose to build a single family home.
Yeah.
But that's not the application, and we can't drive them towards that. We can only, correct me, Commissioner, or anyone else, you know, if you disagree, but we can only drive them to make it better from what it is currently.
And I think to the question that Chris is raising, though, I think is that enough? Is part of the question. Is that
Well,
enough?
given constraints of the property, you're never going to satisfy, you're never going to check every box on the non-conform or the conformities required for that particular zone. You're just not.
Yeah, and stepping back, right? I mean, these things were all allowed in the zone at one point until the regulations came about and said, well, now you need this, right? So this is where it all starts, right? They were all conforming. This was the way that, you know, the B resident zone worked. And B resident's like the number one, like that's the oldest zone, right? So there's all sorts of crazy stuff in the B resident zone. That's why it's such a hodgepodge of different uses a lot of times and a lot of different types of buildings, et cetera. So, you know, and from that perspective, you always have, you're trying to get this zone more conforming, this B resident zone, unless you're going to do it, you know, like we did down on I don't know, what is it, the D zone now on Cross Street, where we basically redid the zone because we're like, listen, we got all sorts of stuff going on here. This is what we want to do as a planning board, as a planning commission. We want this, right? At some point, you may look at the B resident zone that way, but it's a hard zone. There is so much going on in that zone, whether it's use, non-conforming structures, non-conforming lots. It's the oldest zone, you know, and it's just anything you can do to make it more conforming. Unless you're going to overlay the whole zone with something different, it's going to be hard. So you want, I think, applicants to come in and make these things more conforming. And that's what we're trying to do in this particular case.
Planner Abney, did you have any questions for the applicant?
I just had a quick comment. So staff doesn't have any issue with the front lot. With the rear lot, the argument that Mr. Rucci is using would seem to fall short because he's proposing to demolish the existing structure, which is non-conforming as to the side yard setbacks, the location, the frontage on the street, the use, but it's all legally non-conforming. But it exists right now in a single structure. And the regulations allow for an expansion of that structure. In this case, he's demolishing, and state statute lets you preserve some nonconformities, and he gets to rebuild them. And he could expand it, and it's covered in 7.1 in expansion, but he's splitting it out, and he's taking the existing 2-family use in one structure and splitting it into 2. And that's different than just an expansion. But again, I mean, it is this commission's ability to make an interpretation, but just make note that in this area of town, there are many non-conforming uses. There are a bunch of potential redevelopment opportunities, and how this commission chooses to decide this case can help decide how developers look at redeveloping this part of town. Many of the lots in the immediate vicinity are smaller lots that are approximately a ½ acre or smaller. Many have 2-family units on them. And the zoning in this area is both B residence, apartment zone, and multifamily zone.
This is Commissioner Cassavant, though, and I really wish to highlight the challenge we face as a commission here. This particular proposal, if approved, could lead everybody else with a non-conforming use in that quote hodgepodge to argue that the best thing that they can do is to apply for mildly less non-conforming requests. And taken as a whole, perhaps you'd have projects like this that in fact may well improve curb appeal, or as a group, we do have the option to deny a request like this, as opposed to simply saying, well, this is less non-conforming, or they could rebuild it. I find it unlikely to imagine that people would rebuild this structure. They'd probably leave it as it is, but instead you're creating a significant capitalization event. I do agree that we don't have the ability to determine our approval based on whether or not it's for sale or for rental, but we should think about the likely implications of that street as a group should we provide the notion that a quote less conforming use is a better use.
Is that, this is Dan Radman, is that such a bad thing? If that precedent were established and you had a trickle down effect of other neighbors on Forest Street, for example, that are coming to us with applications to modify their properties into a less non-conforming condition, is that bad?
We're getting into deliberations.
Well, actually, that's what I was going to say.
I'm not pointing the finger.
I have a technical question
But
I'm sorry?
Mr. Chris, let's
on a different topic.
let's get our questions done with the applicant, please. Yeah,
Sorry.
please.
Mr. Ritchie, I'm confused a bit. Maybe you can help me. Why are you here before the Planning and Zoning Commission as opposed to the Zoning Board of Appeals? I mean, you have a non-conforming lot. They deal with non-conforming stuff.
Yeah, but we're
Okay.
here because the two-family falls within this particular commission. And under the regs, you can come to this commission to enlarge a non-conforming structure in the B residence zone. So that's why
the reason, because he's in the B residence zone.
he's in the B residence. You're right. I could have gone other places.
Mike Glenn.
Got it. Thank you. Just wondering about.
Good
jurisdiction
question.
And so forth.
ZBA commissioner.
Used to be, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, anybody else? Okay.
Sorry about that.
good,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Ritchie?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Would anybody from the public like to address this application? Lynn, let's check Zoom land, please. In the meantime, commissioners, my inclination is to close this. So is everybody comfortable with me closing this hearing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Lynn, you'll. Okay, great. Super. This application's closed. Okay, item number 5, deliberation, any possible action on closed public hearing item. 485 Laurel Road. Do I have a motion for approval or denial?
John Chris, I move we approve.
Reasons for approval, Mr. Cruz?
The structures are really already in place. You don't see a change in the footprint or coverage much of at all of this property. The only increase is going to be a deck which will be permeable from the rain. So it's not like paving, putting a driveway in. The footings are already there, so that ship sailed. The changes to the buildings that are being contemplated are almost all on the inside. The exterior are fenestration, some trim and so forth, which seems to be planned to be done in a very sympathetic architectural way with high quality materials, which is clearly a historic property. And I got a sense that the applicant is very sensitive to these issues. So I see the changes being requested to being de minimis and increasing the curb appeal and the quality of life in the town.
Great, thank you, Mr. Cruz. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Radman, second. Any further discussion of the motion? Okay, in that case, sorry?
None.
Okay, in that case, I would call the question. John Goodwin, I vote yes. Ken Turner,
Yes.
Dick Ward,
Yes.
Dan Radman,
Yes.
John Chris,
Yes.
Claire Tiscornia,
Yes.
Krista Nielsen,
Yes.
Arthur Cassavant,
Yes.
John Engel.
Yes.
Okay, now we can go back to deliberations. Items number 3 and 4, 158 Forest Street, 160 Forest Street. Does anybody have a motion for approval or denial?
This is Commissioner Cassavant. I will actually move for approval. My logic for that, and I appreciate Commissioner Goodwin's or the chairman's point that we shouldn't deliberate during discussion. But my belief is that the proposed plan improves the quality of the neighborhood without, although it's mildly unusual in its form and structure. I believe that on balance, it will improve the quality of the neighborhood. I am mildly concerned about the fact that we will create 4 more for sale units, but I don't think that's in the purview of our decision to decide.
Thank you, Mr. Cassavant. Do I have a second?
Second, Ken Turner.
Okay, it was a tie, but I'll give it to Mr. Turner. Tie goes to the Zoom guy. How about that? Okay, further discussion of the motion.
This is Dan Radman. I would also agree with Mr. Cassavant. I think our role as a P and Z commission is also to take into account the context of the neighborhood that the application is in, to determine whether that application is sympathetic to the rest of the neighborhood and to the context of the architecture and the housing types and all the things we've already tabled that describe Forest Street. And to that, I think this application is very much in keeping with the rest of what is happening on Forest Street and will be a complement to what's there.
This is Commissioner Kriz. I would actually concur with Commissioner Nielsen's comment on the call it attached to family as opposed to sort of separated to family. Some of them, the more I look at them, the less enamored I am of them. These seem to be reasonably well designed, and they, as she had indicated, and I would agree with this, they are in the back and not really visible to the street or the public very much. And I think about how we deal with this in other aspects of our regulations. For example, a swimming pool in the front yard, setbacks and so forth has to do with impinging on neighbors' view shed and the general public. And here, given the location of the suggested properties, that seems to be fairly de minimis. And I think they're well designed and will increase the quality of the housing stock in town and sort of raise the tone of the street, which is a very mixed street, as other commissioners have indicated. So it's not inconsistent with what we see in neighboring properties. So I would be sympathetic to the application.
God, I'd like to make this Dick Ward. Based on the extensive comments that we received from the applicant's counsel and some of the discussion we've had, am I correct in believing that the regulations which bind us give us sufficient leeway on interpretation so that if we were to approve the application as requested, that it would be consistent and legally consistent with our regulations? I'm assuming that that is the case. I hope it is.
Well, I'm not a land use attorney, obviously, but I think that, and Mr. Rucci, I think, was trying to make this point, is we do have the ability to interpret our regulations. And as long as there's sound reasoning to our interpretation of the regulations, then we are able to do exactly that.
Okay, I'm willing to go along with that. I believe that's correct.
If I can maybe expand on Commissioner John Kriz, Commissioner Ward's comment. What I hear that sort of voce is this somewhat of a loose thread that someone's tugging on, and that someone's going to come along and pull on it really hard, and we may not like that tug. I don't want to put words in your mouth, sir, but I'm kind of getting that vibe, which is a legitimate concern in my humble opinion. I don't get the sense here, but I can understand why that should be an issue for deliberation for this commission. My sense, though, is it's not, but I would welcome other commissioners' views on this. Expanding on your point, sir.
I think it's a valid concern, but I think we still have oversight and authority as to what will be approved in the future with this precedent being set. Someone coming to us with a property down the road that is also non-conforming, and they're proposing a 6-story multifamily unit on the corner of the property, we can easily say no. If it's not satisfying the intent, which is improving or making it less non-conforming or in context with the neighborhood.
Did it last month. We did it last month on South Avenue. I mean, we made the decision that a subdivision of a lot into 2 lots, a single house into 2 houses was not allowed. We're allowed to do that from neighborhood to neighborhood and decide whether it works with the neighborhood or it does not. And so what I hear is that this is the neighborhood for small houses and 2-family houses. They both coexist in this neighborhood very well. The applicant is saying, I'd like to replace 3 structures with 3 structures. This is the neighborhood for, small houses. I just like that.
That's not a fair comparison, John, just because that discussion earlier that you were recused from, that was a conforming use being subdivided. This is a non-conforming use. So I think it's a different comparison.
Actually, and I apologize, Mr. Herring, I have to jump in. You're not seated on this application. Sorry.
Was I incorrect in my comment?
No, you're, once we close the hearing, if you're not seated on the application, you should not discuss the application.
John wasn't seated on the application in the previous discussion.
I'm just using an example. And if you think it's an incorrect example, I'll come up with another example, but okay.
No, I'm just saying that for the purposes of the discussion of this decision, you must be seated.
I am seated, right?
No, I know, no.
Okay.
That's Mr. Herring, isn't it?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
Just to follow where Mr. Herring was going with that, I think what he's getting at is the South Avenue application was an existing conforming compliant lot that they were looking to subdivide into 2 smaller lots that weren't completely conforming. So it was making the condition worse.
Right.
What we're talking about here is 2 existing non-conforming lots that are getting slightly better. So it's a different context.
Yeah, on South Avenue, it was not allowed by the regulations.
No, understood.
This is allowed by the
I'm
regulations.
just finishing Chris's sentence.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay.
I want to state that I'm encouraged by the new and improved landscaping plan, which I thought was a significant step forward, and I hope other applicants will take note.
Yeah, I do think it is a valid question to ask, which is if we were to approve this, are we opening the door? And we have
pulling on the
yeah, and we have opened the door. And frankly, my conclusion and my experience with this is we just have to have the chutzpah, so to speak, when there's a future application that we think does not meet, the case that some of you commission members have already spoken that, does add that level of value. That's the slippery slope we run into, but.
I also want to point out that he did address the loom factor objection that we had, and by reducing the height by 2 feet. And I thought that was significant. So much improved landscaping plan, much improved height. And I do believe that the safety was it got safer when you had the ability to probably not back into the street, but back into that parking space in the front. That seemed to me probably a more safe, although it wasn't mentioned by the applicant, a more safe alternative.
Yeah, the one thing I would argue, disagree with Mr. Rucci slightly on is saying, well, you should be driven to approve this application because it is making it less non-conforming. That is no reason why we have to approve this thing. Because if we were to deny this, it does not become more non-conforming. So we don't have that pressure there. Anybody else? Okay, yeah. Okay, good point. Okay, in that case, Lynn, it's okay that, who moved the motion?
I did, Cassavant.
Cassavant.
And Kent.
Okay, so let's start with item number 158 Forest Street as moved by Mr. Cassavant, seconded by Mr. Turner. John Goodwin, I vote yes. Kent Turner,
Yes.
Dick Ward,
Yes.
Dan Radman,
Yes.
John Chris,
Yes.
Claire Tiscornia,
Yes.
Krista Nielsen,
Yes.
Arthur Cassavant,
Yes.
John Engel.
Yes.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Item number 160 Forest Street on the motion by Mr. Cassavant and the second by Mr. Turner. John Goodwin, I vote yes. Ken Turner,
Yes.
Dick Ward,
Yes.
Dan Radman,
Yes.
John Chris,
Yes.
Claire Tiscornia,
Yes.
Krista Nielsen,
Yes.
Arthur Cassavant,
Yes.
John Engel.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's go to item number 6. As a reminder, we're now in the regular meeting for each of these additional applications. We will not be taking public input. 162 Main Street upon application of Derek Marcus, authorized agent for New Canaan Investment Group LLC, owners for a site plan approval of sections 44C1 for food shop retail in the business A zone at 162 Main Street. Who's here to present?
Good night. This is Derek Marks speaking.
I'm sorry.
Hello, this is Derek Marks, applicant.
Okay, please present.
So we would like just to do interior renovation of an existing commercial space. And I know that it was listed that we were going to be serving food, which is not the case. And we'll simply would like to be serving hot and cold drinks, which is the boba tea, which I'll give you a little background on this particular drink. It's also known as a pearl milk tea, boba milk tea, or simply boba. It's a Taiwanese drink that was invented on Taichung in 1980s. And the tea is mixed with milk or fruits, topped with 2 tapioca pearls. By the early 90s, boba tea became prevalent in Japan and Hong Kong. So we're just updating a existing commercial space, cold and hot drinks.
Okay, questions for the applicant?
This is Dan Radman. Will there be any seating in the shop?
The only seating area that we will have is the countertop, the 42-inch high countertop along to the front window of the existing building on the interior. That is correct.
For approximately how many seats?
We would say it will approximately fit between 2 to 3 seats. And it's just so they can just sit down to actually wait for their drinks or simply enjoy them inside of the store.
Ken Turner, could you go back to the site plan and if you have a parking plan, get a little better idea about how the site works and is there adequate parking?
So right now, you can mostly use the back parking lot or simply use the street parking lot.
Well, do you have dedicated spaces or how does your lease work with parking?
Oh, I wouldn't have the exactly answer for that. The building it's named the 162 Main Street, but the actual store it's on numbers 168. I believe it's a shared parking lot in the rear. And none of the spaces were actually named, if you will, because I know that there is a real estate company to it. That's something we would have to look better into it, but as I know, it's a shared parking lot in the rear, and we can also use the public parking through the front, or simply walk through the front door.
Okay, and the main entry is off of the front of the
Main
building or the side?
It's right across from where they're doing the renovation in the library.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
So right now, the front entrance is on Main Street.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anybody else? Lynn, do you have any comments on this application?
I don't, but with respect to the parking, it's the same parking requirement for a retail bank, business or office use, and they're just changing the use from an office to a food retail, so it falls under the same uses.
So there's
Yeah,
no,
I'm sorry.
there's no requirement for,
Yeah, so the parking is essentially the same as what's there.
right? Okay,
Again, we just, I just want to add that we're just renovating an existing commercial space, and I believe in the previous tenants, we were also serving drinks in space. We're not looking to cook any food or serve any food. It might have a couple of snacks, like in a shelf, and along with the front door on the right-hand side wall, we might add some shelves, which we're gonna put some Japanese snacks to it, just to go with the drinks. But we're not gonna be cooking any food or serving any food whatsoever, or prepping any food. Wanted to be clear on that.
okay. Thank you, sir. Everybody good? Questions? Okay, I'll call the question. Do I have a motion for approval of denial 162 Main Street?
Ken Turner, I motion to approve. And I think it's a compatible use for the neighborhood or for that area. The only concern that I have is that people might double park or try to run in real quick and get their beverage and run out, but yeah, that could be controlled, and there is parking in the rear, so I believe that it's an adequate and it's a justified use.
Okay, have a second?
I'll second. John Cruz.
Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, I call the question. John Goodwin, I vote yes. Ken Turner,
Yes.
Dick Ward,
Yes.
Dan Radman,
Yes.
John Cruz,
Yes.
Claire Tiscornia,
Yes.
Krista Nielsen,
Yes.
Arthur Cassavant,
Yes.
John Engel.
Yes.
Okay, passed unanimously. 130 Main Street upon application of Ed Schofler for CT Connecticut Spa Group LLC DBA New Beauty and Wellness, authorized agent for GCCFC 2007 GG9 Burtis Avenue and Main Street LLC, owners for a site plan approval of sections 42C7 for personal services establishment to include spa treatments, to include facials, Botox treatments, massages, and other wellness treatments, the retail A zone at 130 Main Street. Mr. Sachs, you're presenting?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening, Chairman Goodwin and the entire commission. My name is Brock Sachs. I'm here tonight in my capacity as a licensed real estate salesperson representing Ed Schofler and Paul Dovich as the owners of Connecticut Spa Group LLC, doing business as New Beauty and Wellness. As we have indicated in our site plan application, New Beauty and Wellness is a state-of-the-art luxury spa with an existing location at 1137 Post Road East in Westport. We have negotiated a lease where, subject to site plan approval, New Beauty and Wellness will open a second location in the former New Balance space located in the property known as 126 to 130 Main Street in New Canaan's retail A zone. Our site plan application seeks approval for a change in use to a wellness use as allowed in the town's regulations, section 4.2 C7 A through D for a personal service establishment, which in the case of new beauty and wellness would include facials, massages, aesthetic elective services, including Botox treatments and other wellness treatments. Specifically, the floor plan illustrates that the retail component of the business is located along the entire tenancy facing the street and is 15 feet in depth, except for a part of treatment room 103 that occupies 86 square feet of floor space in the retail area. With that in mind, we are asking for administrative approval as the space is a particularly wide storefront, approximately 36 feet wide, facing the street, and the majority of the retail component of the space facing the street is 15 feet in depth as called for in the regulations. Additionally, the floor plan demonstrates that the personal service part of the use is not located along the building's immediate frontage and is set back and hidden behind walls from street view. Along with the proposed floor plan, we have included the calculation of total floor area for the business. My clients, Ed and Paul, are here tonight to answer any questions. They have provided you with some pictures of their existing location, so you have an idea of the look and feel of their ultra luxury spa business. Thank you for the opportunity. We are happy to discuss and answer any questions you have.
Planner Abney, I understand that we do have the ability to give relief on the full extension, not having a full extension of retail in the front.
There is a slide in there, when you look at 4.2, C, sorry. It says the retail area must be a minimum of 15 feet in depth measured from exterior building line or 20% of the total floor area, whichever is greater. And then it says anything less than 15 feet in depth is subject to administrative approval. Since this is before you for site plan approval is administrative approval for the commission.
Okay, so we have the ability to do that then. Okay, thank you. Yeah, it is. Questions for the applicant?
Excuse me, this is John Chris. The proposal will be fully ADA compliant as far as ingress, egress, and toilets.
Yes, the existing or proposed floor plan shows an ADA bathroom. There is an elevated section in the rear of this space, and there's already a lift there that exists to get people up the rear staircase. So yes.
The plans have been submitted to the fire marshal. Any fire issues given the number of rooms? And
they have not been submitted. That would be our next step, going to Paul.
Those are my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Mr. Sachs.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, do I have a motion for approval or denial of 130 Main Street?
It's John Chris. I move we approve.
Reasons for approval, Mr. Chris?
I see the couple points as far as the lack of a full 15-foot setback or usage on the frontage for retail. I see the 6-foot impingement as being de minimis and not really shifting the character of the retail space or the view from the street, which is a prominent street in town. I see that as a de minimis impingement. I see this as an allowed use under regulations and would be a significant opportunity to generate street traffic and cross shopping and broad support for our downtown area.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second?
Well, second.
Okay, Mr. Ward, second. Any further discussion of the motion? I call the question. John Goodwin, I vote yes. Ken Turner?
Yes.
Dick Ward?
Yes.
Dan Redmond?
Yes.
John Chris?
Yes.
Claire Tiscornia?
Yes.
Kristen Nielsen?
Yes.
Arthur Cassavant?
Yes.
John Engel?
Yes.
Okay, carries unanimously. Okay, 64 Main Street, upon application of Roxanne Santiago, authorization for 62-64 Main LLC for site plan approval of sections 42C7 for personal services establishment to provide comprehensive lash and brow services as well as facials in the retail A zone at 64 Main Street. Who's here to present, please?
Hi, thank you for having us. So we are hoping to open a spa at 64, the rear building that is down the alley towards the back, first floor. It is currently an office use. We are asking to use it as a personal service establishment. It will be a spa, as I said, providing comprehensive brow, lash services, skincare. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. And waxing.
Okay, great.
We'll have 2 treatment rooms. It's 1 practitioner. It's actually someone, we're combining forces, so it's a new company, but also an existing company in town that's been here for 8.5 years, Lavender Lashes, who's being displaced from her current space. So she will be moving into our space. She will be the only practitioner. It's appointment-based, so there's not a ton of foot traffic in terms of in and out. It's a small waiting area, although we usually don't have people waiting. It's 1 person in, 1 person out, and that's it.
Okay. Planner Abney, do we have any issues with changing use from office to personal?
No, we don't.
Okay. Questions for the applicant?
Yes.
Ken
yes.
Turner. As far as ADA, the entry, your egress, is that a step? I see that
It is. So I don't know if you're familiar with the area. It's that alley in between Chang's, is it, the restaurant, and where the pizzeria is. So there are steps all the way down. And once you get into our space, there are 2 steps down to the main level. I don't think there's anything that we can do about it. We are open to doing whatever we need to do to make it compliant if there's anything that we need to do. There are also 2 steps up to the bathroom. Right now, as far as I could tell from the measurements, the size of it is ADA compliant. I believe we're going to have to change out the toilet because it's a little low, so that will bring it up. We're going to put bars in. We may have to put a handrail in on the steps so that people can use that. So that's the plan right now.
Yeah, well, you should be aware that it is not ADA compliant. The steps are an issue. You might look at a ramp.
Yep.
The other problem is the restroom is not wide enough. It doesn't satisfy the 6-foot radius for wheelchair maneuvering. So you need to take a look at that too.
Okay. We're willing to take a look at that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, hi. Is there any retail component to this business?
Yes, so the whole front, there's no windows in the front of the building. All the windows are facing the rear and an alley. The door going in has just a little window in the door. So, but the front of the building, we're going to have, that's going to be our retail area, that whole area. I don't know if you can, so right there where you see the little chairs there for the waiting area, that whole area before the bathroom is basically going to be our retail area.
And there's no windows along
There are
that
no
wall?
windows. No.
Okay, anybody else? Okay.
Obviously, we're first step here, but I'm just, again, I'm to Mr. Turner's point, I'm worried about the ADA access, having steps coming in and steps going up to the bathroom and how that's going to fly. I mean, there's grandfather clauses in the ADA regulations, but
Right.
I would just caution you to review that with
I will.
with the building inspector.
Yes,
To see what's
that's the
allowed.
next step. That's the next step.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, do I have a motion for approval or denial?
Motion to approve.
Okay, reasons for approval, Mr. Engel?
It's a first floor, and so it's appropriate service establishment / retail. I think is probably a better use than an office. I think it's a challenging space. And therefore, this is probably a completely appropriate use for this very challenging space, and I wish them luck.
Okay, do I have a second?
John
Second.
Chris.
Ms. Nielsen, second. Okay, further discussion on the motion? Oh, Mr. Scorney, I'm sorry. I'm gonna get in trouble if I say anything, so I heard a voice. There you go. Okay, I call the question. John Goodwin, I vote yes. Ken Turner,
Yes.
Dick Ward,
Yes.
Dan Radman,
Yes.
John Chris,
Yes.
Claire Tiscornia,
Yes.
Kristen Nielsen,
Yes.
Arthur Cassavant,
Yes.
John Engel.
Yes.
Okay, super. Item number 9, 137 Elm Street. Upon application, Troy Davidson, authorized agent for Robert and Fiona Sig, LLC, owners for site plan approval of sections 42C for a food shop retail in the retail A zone at 137 Elm Street. Who's here to present, please? Okay, Mr. Davidson, you in Zoom land?
Good morning. Do you hear me? Good evening. Am I here?
This is one of our so far briefer meetings, so you don't have to say good morning. We've done that. We can hear you, sir. Please proceed.
All right. Good evening. Thank you for your consideration. Yes, I am Troy Davidson here to represent Bar Vita. We anticipate opening a juice bar, doing an interior remodel only of trade and tenant fixtures and equipment. It's currently a retail shop, and as our understanding was at one point in time, a Dunkin' and/or / Baskin Robbins. So we believe that it fits in the use for this particular zone. Will be an all natural, 100% organic, 100% plant-based juice bar and cafe, serving our national premium nutritional beverages and meals. We currently operate our first unit in Darien, out of which the ownership group is based, and are excited about coming to New Canaan. And many patrons of Darien have asked us to come to New Canaan. So this is what we're applying for, an opportunity to do this fit out in 137 Elm Street.
Thank you, sir. Questions for the applicant?
Before we get into questions,
Yeah.
Lynn, there's no application on the website? Maybe I'm just staring at it and not seeing it.
There it is.
Okay. Dan, is there anything specific you'd like to see?
Just the floor plan, just to
Yeah.
get an
Lynn, if
idea.
you can show us the floor plan. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it. So
Yeah.
is there any seating in this particular application?
Just leave it right there, Lynn.
Can't tell from there. I can see the equipment line and a bathroom.
It would be a little further up, yeah. So depending on building permit requirements, 4 there are shown, possibly 4 more along what would be the east wall there, right? Just in the front door there. Yep.
Will you be anywhere near 20 people seating?
Not even close.
Okay. So the bathroom that's shown in the rear, that's for staff only?
The bathroom that's shown is customer ADA bathroom that we are adding to the space.
Gotcha.
Right there.
Yep.
Yep.
I'm good.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, sir. Do I have a motion for 137 Elm Street approval or denial?
Motion to approve.
Reasons for approval, Mr. Engel?
I know that space well. I worked there 38 years ago when I was a 16 serving ice cream at the then Baskin Robbins. So not much has changed in 38 years. I'm sure your fit out will be top notch and a credit to the neighborhood. It's an entirely appropriate use for that neighborhood. So I approve.
Okay, great. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Radman, second. Any further discussion of the motion? Okay, I call the question. John Goodwin, I vote yes. Ken Turner,
Yes.
Dick Ward,
Yes.
Dan Radman,
Yes.
John Chris,
Yes.
Claire Tiscornia,
Yes.
Krista Nielsen,
Yes.
Arthur Cassavant,
Yes.
John Engel.
Yes.
Okay, super. Motion carries. Item number 10, administrative actions or other matters as may properly come before the commission, sorry. Item A, 830J draft affordable housing plan. The committee had an additional meeting. I was out of the country, so maybe Planner Abney, if you can update the commission on the discussion at that meeting.
Sure. So it was an additional meeting and we reviewed the comments that we received from the public. There were very few comments that were received. One of the comments, one set of comments came from Westcog. One of Westcog's comments was not making, obtaining a moratorium as our strategies or goals towards affordability. And we're massaging the language around that. Some of the other stuff was adding an educational aspect for the public to one of our strategies of how we're going to move forward, and just some organizational matters with respect to the plan itself, and sort of organize an executive summary to go at the front of the document in the form of a letter. The Board of Selectmen reviewed the document on the 17th of this month. They opted to defer adoption of it until possibly their meeting on the 7th of June. And we're going to seek an extension from the state to submit after the June 1st deadline.
Which multiple towns are also doing, is that correct?
There's already over more than a dozen towns that have requested same.
Okay. Art or Krista, anything you all would add?
I would add that the variety of discussions, and particularly the discussion several weeks ago, have increased the quality of this plan. I do think that it is still incumbent upon us to move forward with an educational opportunity for anyone in New Canaan, which was not provided by the public input activity, so that people can understand what exactly we are dealing with as a town. But I think the work done by Lynn and the committee has been excellent.
So in terms of that educational opportunity, by what means are we going to try to reach the public so that they're even aware that there's an educational opportunity they can avail themselves of?
I believe that where we came away at the last meeting was, after the Board of Selectmen review this, we should then expect that there will be another subcommittee created or another action committee, and that a key thing of that action committee should be to create and implement a plan for education. That could be as simple as holding forums in the library or other public space to explain the concepts of 830G, for example, affordable housing and low-income housing and where we are. But we did agree that the right next step was to move that to whatever happens after the Board of Selectmen. I believe that other people may have comments on that, but that was my takeaway.
Okay. I mean, that seems like a good step down the road. I think after people have that educational opportunity, I would go back to, I think it'd be really good to get direct input from the public about different options for situating affordable housing within the town down the road.
We should also add that not present in tonight's meeting, but an important concept raised by Mr. Hobbs was the possibility of reaching out to the Board of Selectmen to consider the provision of capital and expense in support of the town developing affordable housing, which would be a corollary as well that we need to consider.
Great.
And I did listen to the replay. And the one thing I'll say is that listening to the replay was very consistent with, I think, the discussion we had as a commission a month ago, and I think we had broad agreement. And look, I think the key is, we are looking for a delay, but on the other hand, the objective is to submit a plan sooner than later. But the real work is going to then get done by a permanent committee, which will then, among other things, as Art is saying, have within their responsibilities to push that education effort.
Good. Do we know how much money roughly is in the housing fund as of now?
Lynn?
Can we try to get that for the next meeting?
Probably none, because it is their habit to sweep it periodically, and they sweep it. Lynn, tell me if I'm wrong, but they've been sweeping it every 6 months on the current project, and they only take in $400,000 or so a year per year on average for the last 5 years. So
okay,
you can count on there being not much.
Not much. Yeah, if we could just confirm the amount for the next meeting, please.
Is there any further development on what was outlined here on page 27, the naturally occurring affordable housing, and any possibility of modification of state regulations or petition to the state about modifying 830G to allow naturally occurring affordable housing? Anything on that? No.
No. Sorry, no.
Regarding the Affordable Housing Fund, I would suggest that the stock number is not really the valuable one. It's the flow number, because stock goes up and down. You want to know how much money do we generate every year? Now, it may be spent because we're in construction now, so obviously we have a good use for it. We're building affordable housing. So it's how much money comes in every year. And then you look at that and say, well, is that enough? Should we have suggested the powers that be who can decide this? Should there be more coming in through some means? Yeah. So I think the flow number is better than the stock number, because the stock number can go from zero to something to back to zero, and okay.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I agree. I mean, if there's something that we could have, I would just add on to Mr. Chris's point, and if there's any way we can get, let's say, past 3-year historical financials.
I do 5 or 6.
If it's easy enough, sure. The more the better, but at least I would say 3 years of historical financials, including, a cash flow statement, an income statement. I'm sorry, cash flow statement, a balance sheet, I guess an income statement as well, although I'm not sure how pertinent it would be, but at least a cash flow statement of that and a balance sheet. And Mr. Chris, do you think that we should have quarterly numbers or annual or both?
I think annual, because quarterly, getting too much in the weeds, frankly.
Okay.
Annual is close enough for government work, and doing for a number of years would be useful. Then we can decide whether, or come to a conclusion whether requests should be made to others, as we have in the past, to perhaps generate some more cash for that. But we're going to know how much cash is coming in over the transom every year.
Yeah.
That's the number I'd like to see, and probably for at least 5 years. If we can do more, that'd be great.
Agree. And if that could potentially dovetail into an ARPA discussion, I think that's reasonable as well.
I did, after the hearing, submit which, Lynn, I don't know if you CC'd the commission.
I didn't see it.
Okay. At 5 a.m. the next morning on a car to the airport, I did per the commission, send an email to the first selectman. So Lynn, if you could CC the commission with that, please. Yeah, I think, I don't disagree about getting the numbers.
Yeah.
But I think, again, I'm looking at this permanent affordable housing committee as the group that's going to be responsible for taking the lead on affordable housing, including, what are the financing options? So
just one more question along those lines. Are we envisioning right now this permanent subgroup, all their meetings being the same as this commission or other commissions, meaning everything that is public, foiable, and following all the kind of rules and regulations of any other type of longstanding?
Yeah, it'll be a fully established, I don't know what the right legal term is. It won't be a commission, it'll be a committee, right, Lynn?
I believe it'll be a committee unless either the council or the board. of
Right,
Selectmen
right.
wants to determine it.
But yeah, so it'll operate under FOIA regulations.
Okay.
So let me just clarify what I think I heard you say. We have a committee and its job is to make this plan, this recommendation. And one of the things that we haven't done is sensitize the public and involve the public and educate the public. So that's still left to be done. And there is some conversation about whether this committee will be made permanent and what the role of that permanent committee will be in the future. But it seems to me that before this committee is done and this plan is done, that you want to define the plan, and you're talking about defining it financially. It seems to me that you could define this either financially, some number of millions of dollars recommended, or you could define the problem in terms of the amount of housing. It seems to me that it would be more appropriate for this committee to set a target in terms of the amount of housing over what period of time would be optimally produced, and allow the Board of Finance to go figure out how much money based on current cost of a unit of housing and projected cost of a unit of housing over what period of time, what mechanism, i.e. tax, general fund, bonding, they want to do to accomplish that. But it seems to me that the mission of the committee would be to say, we'd like to target 100 units of housing, in 5 years or whatever that is. And then specifically ask the Board of Finance and the selectmen to address that with a number and a plan.
Yeah. So to that point, Mr. Engel, that's why I was mentioning last meeting about, I think, the need for this committee to have kind of collaboration, not just with, the existing boards and commissions within the town, but actually have members from those boards and commission as part of the sitting committee. Because I think, rather than, we know how long it can take when, the left hand has to talk to the right hand and, separate meetings and FOIA and everything else. So I think we could expedite that process that you're speaking of, where you're thinking about not just the housing stock, but the finances that, each serve as context for one another. But I think that's why I think we should have members of the Board of Finance, members of Town Council, and frankly, members of the public as well, as part of these committees, along with the existing P and Z members.
And all of that, again, this is not going to be a subcommittee of the commission.
Right.
Right. So, and that, James, everything you said is what the committee has discussed in terms of the composition of the membership. That it should be the relevant stakeholders within town government, but also members of the public. And something that we did hear loud and clear is when we did do our public hearing, there was interest in members of the public in joining the committee. And some of the feedback we got was, well, maybe there's new blood needed, which I completely advocate for. So agree with everything you said is Krista, Art, Lynn, right?
Yeah, agree with
And
that.
there-
And then to Mr. Engel's point, I would argue that the plan in saying that one of the goals should be to maintain a rolling moratorium every 4 years is setting the goal of the number of units. I can't tell you exactly what that number is, but that's what needs to be funded. is enough
Backs
to get
into
us-
it.
Yeah.
And in terms of educating the public, there's no better way to educate the public than to assign the number, right? And tell them what it's going to cost in terms of taxes. I mean, once you tell the public it's going to cost $10 million, the public's going to take interest. Right now, it's just a theoretical plan. But once we assign a number to it, right, and we talk about the scale that is required to meet the moratoriums over what amount of time and what's going to be required to do that, the public will show interest. They'll start asking those questions.
Maybe even more so than the money is where it could potentially be located to draw the public's interest. Yeah.
Okay, everybody good? Okay, super. Item B, Grace Farms Foundation, 365 Luke's Wood Road, approval for court usage gymnasium for commission approval by outside groups or partner organizations for the summer 2022 court schedule from 6/1/2022 to 8/31/2022. While I completely disagree with the reasons that have been advanced by certain individuals and their lawyer that I should recuse myself, I will indeed continue to recuse myself for the time being. So I'm going to ask Commissioner Nielsen to run this portion of the meeting, and I recommend, given the order of seatings for alternates, I recommend you seat Commissioner Herring. Thank you.
Mr. Herring, you're seated for this agenda item.
Noted, thank you.
Oh, sorry, I can't.
So I also received, or the town planner also received a letter from an attorney suggesting that Commissioner John Engel, me, recuse himself from this vote or any votes concerning Grace Farms, saying that I might be biased. I gave that some thought. I spoke to the town attorney. I looked up the regulation. The regulation says that the standard is whether I have a pecuniary or personal interest. I had to look up pecuniary in the dictionary, and it means, do I have a financial interest? And I remember, I think it was probably the first time I encountered pecuniary or personal interest was when I was on the ZBA maybe 15 years ago. And I had to ask the town attorney then, should I recuse myself from a matter? And he said, if you don't have a financial interest, then you have an obligation. Just because you know somebody or because you, is not a good enough reason to recuse yourself. If you don't have a financial interest, or if you don't think you can be fair. So I gave this a good deal of thought, and I believe I can be fair. I think it's okay for me to know a lot of people and to be supportive of a lot of our nonprofits in this town and still be fair when the Glass House, the Nature Center, St. Luke's, or any of these nonprofits come before us. So I'm going to hold Grace Farms to the same standard I would for anyone else. And I've chosen not to recuse myself from matters concerning Grace Farms. I have no financial interest. I've never been on their board, and I really have had no communication with any employer board member of Grace Farms on any Grace Farms matter in years. So I just don't think that I have any bias in the matters of Grace Farms.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Engel. Ms. Abney, could you walk us through what is being requested?
Thank you, Ms. Chairman. They are requesting their court schedule for the summer, June 1st through August 31st. This is pretty standard. You guys see administrative items like this regularly from St. Luke's, from the country school. I believe country school had one last month for their baseball fields. And this is of the same vein. It's just their proposed court schedule for the summer season.
Is this what we've approved in the past? Is it similar to a year ago?
Yes. Well, a year ago in operation. They didn't open to the public. They were closed for COVID. I don't believe they opened to the public until September of 2021. So this would be similar to what was from
Couple years.
2019 and what they had proposed in 2020 with the hopes of opening, but they didn't.
This is John Chris, the applicant at Grace Farms is aware that these outside groups and people who would be participating in these sports, all those activities would fall under the head count limits that have been set, and they're aware of all that as well as operating hours.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This would be consistent with those. Okay, thank you.
Yes. So they don't have reporting events under.
I can't hear you.
And I believe it's under condition 16. They have that activity chart, and they don't have to start reporting and noting how many events they have of each type a year until they hit the number of 200. These are proposed to be well under.
Thank you.
Any other questions or conversations? Lynn, do we need to take a vote to approve this?
You do, please.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Okay, Mr. Admin, is there a second? I'll second. Seconded by Claire Tiscornia. All right, now I need to find John. All right, for the roll call, Mr. Herring, you're seated for Mr. Goodwin. How do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Ward,
Yes.
Mr. Radman,
Yes.
Mr. Chris,
Yes.
Ms. Tiscornia? Yes. Ms. Nielsen, yes. Mr. Cassavant,
Yes.
Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nielsen. Item C, discussion of patios, Planter Avenue.
So before we go there, can we just have a brief discussion about the timeline?
Sure.
Okay, so I got responses from most of you, but
Could you use the microphone, please?
sorry, you can't hear me. So I just wanted, you all got an email from me like a few weeks ago, asking about a bunch of dates for a timeline to set up the meetings. And I kind of just want to get some confirmation. I'm missing 4 of you haven't responded, and I mean, if we can confirm everyone's availability.
Well, Lynn, why don't you give us the dates?
The
please?
dates are, so the possible dates are the 16th of June. And that would only be used if the WPCA were to send a referral to you guys for an 824 review. If they do, we would hold a meeting on the 16th of June with respect to the 824. The second date would be a potential date of June 20th or June 22nd to open the public hearing. And potentially, if we were to open the public hearing on the 20th, we could continue it to the 22nd. But if not enough people are available on the 20th, we would commence the hearing on the 22nd.
Well, do you want to start with the 16th?
The 16th, yes.
Okay, so I can do the 16th. Ken,
16 is good.
Dick,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Claire Tiscornia,
No.
Krista Nielsen,
Yes.
Art Cassavant,
Yes.
John Engel,
Yes.
Chris Herring,
Yes.
James Bash,
Yes.
Paul Connect.
Yes.
Okay, and next, Lynn?
Are these all at 7 p.m., just to clarify?
6.
6, okay, gotcha. Yep, thank you.
So Lynn, the next date is the,
20th of June. The Monday.
okay. And even though that is a federal holiday, we're still going to consider it.
I can take it off.
Well, I'm not telling you today, take it off. I'm
The
just,
town is not planning to close, so.
okay, the town will be open. Okay.
I don't know.
20th.
What's that holiday?
It's Juneteenth.
Juneteenth.
Okay. I can do it. Ken Turner,
Yes.
Dick Ward,
Yeah.
Dan Radman,
Yes.
John Chris,
Yes.
Claire Tiscornia,
Yes.
Krista Nielsen,
Yes.
Art Cassavant,
Yes.
John Engel,
Yes.
Chris Herring.
No on that date.
No. Okay, James Bash,
Yes.
Paul Connect.
Yes.
Okay. So that's the 20th, and then the next day is the 22nd.
The next date would be the 22nd.
Okay, John Goodwin.
21.
Yeah,
22.
22nd.
2-2, Jim.
John Goodwin, yes. Ken Turner,
Yes.
Dick Ward,
Yes.
Dan Radman,
Yes.
John Chris,
Yes.
Claire Tiscornia,
Yes.
Krista Nielsen,
Yes.
Art Cassavant,
Yes.
John Engel,
Yes.
Chris Herring,
Yes.
James Bash,
Yes.
Paul Connect.
I'm assuming this is going to be a hybrid meeting, so yes.
Okay, that's correct. Okay, Lynn, what's the next date?
The next date would be the regular meeting for the 28th of June, which I already know that one of you cannot be here.
I couldn't hear her.
Then you need to.
Sorry,
grab the
I'm
microphone.
going to use the mic. I'm sorry.
Okay, but that's a regular meeting.
That's a regular meeting. The next two dates, it's actually going to become one date that would be the July 13th. I just need everyone's availability.
Okay, so the 12th is out.
The 12th is out.
Okay, so July 13th. John Goodwin, not wild about it, but yes. Ken Turner.
Can make it.
Was that a yes, Ken?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Dick Ward.
Yes.
Okay, Dan Radman.
Was it 12th or 13th?
13th, Dan.
13th. 13th, yes.
Okay, John Chris,
Yes.
Claire Tiscornia.
No.
Okay, Krista Nielsen.
No.
Okay, Art Cassavant,
Yes.
John Engel.
Yes. And are all these at 6 PM?
Yes.
Okay.
Chris Herring,
Yes.
James Bash,
Yes.
Connect.
Yes.
Okay, does that do it, Lynn?
That is. Thank you very much.
Okay, super. Okay, let's go on to patios. Lynn, why don't you lay out the issue for us, please?
Need a better microphone, Lynn.
Mike.
Please.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Now,
Yes.
sorry. Thank you. So I'm assuming you all had a chance to read the narrative that I put together. Part of the issue is, I mean, they can be broken down into multiple issues here, not just with patios. So I'm just going to sort of summarize what was said and call out some of the things. So some of the issues are whether setbacks with respect to developments of the pool can be permitted in the setback. And then there's a separate question of whether patios themselves in general can be in the setback. There's also there's, aside from that, there's also there's discussion. I broke that out. Wait, sorry. I broke that out into also a discussion of drainage because most patios are impervious surface coverage. And we have a trigger in the drainage policy, the town's drainage policy, that in smaller lot zones that are half acre or less, that calls out 500 square feet or greater triggers the drainage analysis. And in the larger lot zones of 1 acre or more, 1,000 square feet or more triggers a drainage analysis. And some of the stuff that we're seeing is there's a tendency to design pools that come under the threshold. So in larger lot zones, we tend to see where 1,000 square feet would be the trigger, pools that are designed to 40 by 20. So it's an 800 square foot pool. And then, coming in and saying that there's going to be no patio there. So there's not 1,000 square feet of coverage that's, and it doesn't get, there's no drainage analyzed. So then if there's an issue, there's no mitigation involved. And then some of the other things that I pulled out is that some of the other discussions about patios is whether that they can, when they encroach into the setbacks, is there a distance that they need to be from the property line? Or can they just go straight out to the lot line and you can develop the patio on the lot line? So staff had already started looking at some of the issues with respect to drainage and how it ties to patios prior to this discussion, because you know, we have there are issues in town, especially in neighborhoods where there's already existing drainage concerns. And then the issue of whether patios belong in the setback or not when they're with respect to development of a pool came up last month. And staff started to do some analysis of what some of our neighboring communities do with respect to patios. And we looked at Darien, Stamford, Wilton, Greenwich, Weston, and Westport, all similar except for Stamford, which is a larger city. Pretty much the same, and whether they where they belonged, whether they were in the setback or not, where they went to the lot line. In most of the communities, they count for coverage, patios count for coverage. And where that comes in is it sort of forces you to look at all the impervious surface on your site and look at it. And there's some aspect of it counts for coverage in most areas. There's also definitions of the patio that sort of need to be discussed as part of this conversation. And how we define a patio. We define a patio as an on-grade structure that can go up to 36 inches, which is 3 feet. So 3 feet, you might have steps to go up it. So one could argue that it's not necessarily on grade. What else did we have? And so as part of what we did is we sort of recommended some possibilities of how to think about patios and what the commission could potentially consider. The commission could look at considering patios as coverage. It sort of would force some planning to happen around town as to where patios belong, what kinds of development will happen on sites. For the most part, the real problem is when the developments happen on smaller in-town lots, on smaller parcels, you know, in the A zone, the 3rd acre zone, where the lots are like 10,000 square feet, and then they're demolishing smaller houses, building larger houses. They already have a smaller backyard, and now they're taking their backyard and converting it into an accessory structure and then adding a patio. Some of the other things that we've suggested is that the commission consider modifying the town's drainage policy and just require a drainage analysis no matter what for the development of any pool, no matter what the size. And then we can just look at the drainage across the board for everybody. We've also suggested that the commission could consider modifying the thresholds that trigger the requirements for the drainage analysis. Perhaps the 500 square feet and the 1,000 square feet are not the correct thresholds based on the development that's happening in town. And then we've recommended, as I said before, potentially changing the definition of patio to be clearer as to what it is.
Then I have just a question on what you just said. Does this commission have the ability to change the drainage policy? Isn't that from the engineering department?
So no, the drainage policy is ours.
Oh, it's
in
ours.
So it is ours. It's a policy, but we have called it out in 6.4J. And we've, so we could actually, if this commission wanted, could codify the policy further as part of the regulations, which is another option. So for instance, if you were to look at Greenwich, they have a substantial drainage policy that you have to complete every time you do any construction. Some would argue theirs is really intense, and maybe not the right one, but there's, I guess you could, between what we have and what they have, there's many levels in the middle. So we could sort of strengthen that policy.
Did I hear you say that the main reason we're looking at the patio, defining more strictly the definition of patio is one of drainage? Is that the main reason?
It's one of the reasons that it ties to drainage. It ties to drainage, sorry. Yes.
It's the reason that we're looking at this now is because we have more drainage problems than ever before.
So we're not looking at it. The reason we're looking at it is because the question was raised as to where patios can be. It's come up on a lot of recent plans. We've had, there's a lot of construction going around town and across the board, not just with pools. We've had multiple plans where we've approved something, we've gotten as-built, we've gone out to do an inspection before they get a CO, and what's built is not what was on the as-built, nor was it what's approved.
So I heard you say there's the setback question
Yep.
and there's the drainage question. Those are the main
There's
two.
setback, yep.
But I think it's a great question, John. This is Chris Herring, as to what our goal of this is, because I for one, submitted a couple of thoughts on non-permeable surface thoughts to Lynn, to staff a couple months ago, because there's just, having done a recent renovation on my house, I was kind of shocked that the only thing that we're really concerned about is how much building coverage you have, that you could asphalt your entire lawn, cut all the trees down, and there's really no reg against that. Full stop. So most towns have a non-permeable surface approach, and we don't have a very mature one. So it could be about, drainage. It could be also about, heat spots in terms of having a big parking lot with no break in it. And obviously it can be about drainage. It can be about all sorts of things. But so I think it could be a broader issue than just drainage.
This is John, Chris. I see a couple points here. One is on drainage. We often talk about this with, for example, pathways or driveways that are drainable, but drainable to what extent. And so, it's like a perk test, trying to figure out whether you can put a septic in, the water infiltrates to what speed, and that can vary depending on the coverage. If you have patios, there's some that are asphalt, that are some that are flagstone with spaces in between where they will drain. Do we care? Also with setbacks, if you have a patio, it means you're going to have people and activity. And that is an issue as far as impinging on neighbors. So now you could obviously do it just on your lawn, but it tends not to happen. If you have a more permanent surface, it means it's going to be more permanent activity. And is that something we need to think about? You mentioned also steps and so forth, because, okay, it's a hilly town. And so you may have people putting fill in. So you go up 3 steps and they flatten out part of their property in order to put a patio in. Which do you count as the patio? Is the steps, and you have the whole fill issue as a separate issue, and movement of dirt. And then, do we treat the steps as part of the patio or not? Open question.
Yeah, I think we could go down a pretty deep rabbit hole trying to figure out exactly what a patio is, and and then which one's a pool patio, and then which one's a backyard wine patio, and which one's a barbecue. And I just think we need to define what we're trying to solve here better.
Oh.
I think there's a lot to this that we could go in different directions.
I don't think it's that complicated, actually. I think as far as our current zoning regulations go, it's clear in terms of identifying that structures cannot be within the setbacks, right? A built structure, whether that's a shed, a solar panel, a pool, a generator, whatever can be construed as a structure cannot be within the setbacks. The regulation that Lynn is identifying in 3.4.b.4 associates the patio classification, but as part of the accessory pool or sports facility. I forget the exact, what is it, page 63. So sorry, page 63. So it defines it as part of the non-illuminated outdoor recreation facility, which it's getting into the details of a pool and what components are part of a pool. There's nothing in our regulation that says a patio cannot be in the setback. I know you think differently, Lynn, but that's how I read it. And what's clear in our regulations is structures cannot be in a setback, but our definition of patio specifically states that a patio is not a structure.
Yeah, I agree with you. But so that's where the conflict exists, is that we say a patio is not a structure, therefore theoretically it can be in a setback. And then we go on and say, but a pool patio cannot be in a setback. And then that just makes us have to define what's a pool patio. Is it one that's attached to the pool? If there is a 2-inch grass strip between that and the patio, is it a pool patio? If it's 5 feet away, is it a pool patio? Like that's the rabbit hole I'm talking about.
In my interpretation, it's if there's a physical connection to the pool structure itself, then it becomes a connection and a continuation of the pool, quote unquote, structure.
So you have the 1-inch grass strip between it. So now you're at an island that's different.
Right.
And
But then it's the same rabbit hole when you're trying to define impervious area for a patio, right? If you're going to do a 20 by 40 patio that's poured concrete and that's impervious, yes, that'll be impervious and you need to deal with drainage issues. But then if you're putting that 1-inch grass strip in between 2-foot square bluestone pavers, it's not an impervious, but it's still a patio. So which way does it fall?
Right.
So, all right, so what I hear you saying is maybe we should further refine the definition of a patio, and then to address maybe the drainage issue, maybe we add that further refined patio definition to building coverage.
I completely disagree.
Okay.
Patios should not be part of building coverage. They are not part of building coverage in the other towns. They are part of overall site coverage, but they are not building coverage. Correct me if I'm wrong, then.
Well, they just define them as coverage. They don't call it.
Westport, trust me, I used to work in Westport. Westport clearly stipulates that they are part of overall site coverage. They are not part of building coverage. A deck or a structure, quote unquote, is part of building coverage, and that's in our code as well. Patios are not.
But do we have site coverage, Dan?
Does it boil down to whether it's impervious or pervious?
Yes, no, there's clarifications there, but it's the same argument as if you were to classify a driveway as building coverage. It's not. It's site coverage.
Well, then I think, back to Mr. Herring's point, then I think we just we need to kind of further think about clarifying the regs. So regarding impervious versus pervious, so that we don't have some of the drainage issues that are emerging that Lynn is mentioning. So maybe it's just, we just center the discussion on that.
I mean, if you look at, one of the things that I was looking at 24 Church Street, if you look at like not to pick, I'm sure it's a beautiful house. It looks, I hope no one on this phone designed it, but just looking at the aerial shot on it, it's got, a massive driveway, massive pool deck, which looks beautiful. But you just have to think about how that sits next to its neighbors, which also has a fully paved area. And so I wonder whether defining that site coverage, to your point, Dan, is a good, do we have any site coverage in the current regs?
No. We do not.
And did staff look at Westport site coverage regs?
So yeah, so a lot of the communities around us have, they look at site coverage with respect to impervious versus pervious surface coverage. And then they look at building coverage and they break it out that way. And they give you a limiting number as to what your overall site coverage is for pervious versus impervious area. And then they give you a building coverage number % of your lot. And it varies by zone for many of the communities.
Those are very helpful metrics in terms of
Yeah.
determining that drainage requirement.
Yes, and we just have a building coverage, and then we exempt some things that some of our neighboring communities would count in that site coverage.
So maybe it would be helpful in terms of next steps to try to cement what we actually do to show those comparables then from those towns, how they lay it out, and maybe we can use that as a benchmark for our own regs.
Yeah, this is Art. I have three quick observations. One, the fact that a bunch of designs are coming in exactly below the minimums means that people are actually paying attention to what the rules are and designing things to meet our guidelines. That's not bad. Number two, if people go out to do inspections and things aren't built as they were designed, there is a clear mechanism for dealing with that. And that's not germane to this discussion at all. If people design something and then build it differently, we ought to tell people to rip it out and be done. That's simple. But what I hear here is interestingly a continuation of the earlier discussion we had with respect to Forest Street, right? We're starting to get density of use issues downtown. And we should, in fact, at a minimum, look like the communities that are around us in terms of what they are doing. I'm certain that Darien and Norwalk and Reading and other towns have similar downtown issues, and we should probably figure out what they are doing. I agree with Commissioner Radman entirely. We shouldn't be defining a patio as a structure. It's not. But if what we need are some narrow changes to avoid the paving of downtown, then we should propose those.
But you mentioned that there are so many applications coming in that are following the guidelines. There most likely are many, but there's also many applications that have come in specifically when it comes to the patios and the setbacks over the course of however many years, call it 5-10 years, that have been in the setbacks and have been approved through zoning and have been built that way and exist in town that way right now. So, prior to, and actually some of them have been approved while Lynn's been here. So, are we going to backstep and change the regs to not allow that anymore?
Well, if our current policy is no longer appropriate, yes, we should. We're not going to go back and change anybody's prior approval. But if we are finding that, we're behind the times and we probably should have changed it 10 years ago, no reason not to change it now. I mean, I would presume that from Lynn's professional perspective, probably the simplest thing to me when I read the memo was we should probably have drainage studies for anything that's material everywhere. And, again, my earlier comment is we should probably look like the towns around us with respect to what the rules and regulations are, because they're probably formed by good sense. If a bunch of people were able to do it before we changed the rules, like our affordable housing rules that we finally implemented, then, then we should go forward and make those changes.
Yeah, it's well said, Commissioner Casa. I like that approach.
So just specifically what approach? Is it using comparables from other towns regarding this issue, pervious versus impervious, and using
I think
a benchmark for our own regulations?
Well, I don't want to paraphrase it, but yeah, I think I would argue that I think finding site coverage, using that term that Commissioner Radman used, I think finding the ratios of site coverage per lot size would be a good, interesting compare. I think looking at the setbacks for pools and decks is another interesting compare. I mean, it seems like staff has said here that, that that defining what a patio is, having some sort of patio, like is gravel a patio? No. Is 2x2 flagstone set in grass a patio? No, but perhaps you add up the 2x2s and that becomes your patio coverage. You know, just because you spread out everything by a ½ inch doesn't mean that it's no longer a patio. Maybe you count the impervious elements of it. I mean, there are ways to get through that. I thought the letter that, one of the residents, business owners wrote was a very sympathetic letter. I think he asked some very rational questions of us.
Lynn, are you getting the guidance you need?
Yep. I'll put
Pick up the
together-
microphone, please.
Yes, and I'll put together a table of comparables for next month. We already started that, so.
But you should be clear to us, what are the answers that you need?
So I think the larger questions are whether a pool patio is permitted in the setback, whether patios in general are permitted in the setback, and then how we define patios and whether we want to count it towards either building coverage or an impervious surface coverage.
But won't we better be able to address those once we see your table of comparable?
Sure, I mean, and I can bring back a comparable.
And not to be an idiot here, but there are two different setbacks. There's building setback and there's accessory structure setback, right?
Correct.
So we're talking accessory, like if you put a shed on your 3rd acre lot, it's a 5-foot setback. So we're talking about that. We're not talking about building setback, right?
Correct.
Correct. There is a setback, and the regs also spell out that you can build certain things as accessory structures, and you don't even need a permit, but you still have to comply with setback.
But the hiccup to that whole argument is structure.
Correct. But
Structures can't be in the setback.
But if you go back to the definition of yard setback, it says the minimum required distance from any street line, lot line, or edge of an access way, in the case of a parcel encumbered by an access way, to a building, structure, or a use. And then in the regs, we define use as the specific purpose for which a building, structure, or land is designed, arranged, intended, or for which it is or may be occupied or maintained.
But then the example that Commissioner Chris brought up is you have a lawn. There's a use there. Can that be in the setback? I want to put a badminton court right up against my property line. Technically, that's a use and it's allowable. What's the difference between that and putting a patio close to the property line?
So in the use of a badminton court, you fit right next to the property line, you probably would be coming for a zoning variance or a special permit. It would be a public process to permit that use because
I'm not saying building a structure. We're talking about use. So my 12-year-old wants a badminton game with his friends over the weekend. I'm going to put up a net and a use up against my property line. I'm allowed to do that.
Yeah, but that's not a permanent it's not a permanent patio, which a patio is. I mean, right? I mean, to answer your question, Dan, right? You said, what's the difference?
It's not a structure, but it could be a permanent use. And I wouldn't be required any zoning approval to do that.
But your characterization was you wanted to throw up a net to use it. That's different from building a patio.
This is John Chris. Is it technically possible that you could permanently put up or leave up the badminton net? Yeah, but I don't see that as really likely. I would say there's a distinction rather than difference between someone putting a badminton net up that is in all likelihood going to be a temporary usage versus I'm putting down flagstones that are not going anywhere and they're going to be there for the indefinite future and it's going to be used in some manner. I would say those are distinctions, or differences, not distinctions.
Agreed. I've got a much better example. And this example exists probably in about a quarter to half of the residences here in town. Your driveway and the apron to the garage are allowed to be within the setbacks, right? Guaranteed 25.
They have to be.
Yeah, guaranteed 25% of the homes in town have a permanent basketball court at the edge of that driveway apron, right up against the property line inside the setbacks. That's a permanent use, permanent activity allowed within the setbacks. No approval required. What's the distinction there between that use and having a patio use in the setback?
Yeah, Dan, I think that's a great example. The driveway use came to mind as you said that, because my kids scream and yell in our driveway, so.
Right,
So-
ride bikes.
I think there has to be a very, I agree that there's an argument towards the use component of it, but the clearest distinction is the definition of what constitutes a structure. And currently our regulations clearly stipulate that a patio is not a structure and clearly identifies the components of the building or the site that are structures that have to conform to setback requirements. I think that's pretty simple.
So what we're saying is that concern really is primarily one of drainage and permeability. And it would seem to me that you're saying there's some ambiguity in the current regulations. The point would be we need to tighten them up. And the best way to do that is to look at what other people have done and then make a decision.
This is maybe something we need to research, but I guess I'd be interested to know in light of this conversation, in places that define site coverage separate or in addition to building coverage, can those things that count towards site coverage occur within the setback? Because that seems to also be part of this, is what do we allow in the setback?
My own sense is that the thing that really, the two things that really sort of get neighbors' blood up. One is drainage issues. How many drainage issues have we had to deal with in this commission? Okay, and it's not just annoyance. I mean, you can talk about flood issues for your home and so forth. I mean, you're talking real housing damage and inconvenience. So the drainage issue, I got a lot of sympathy for. As far as the other is impinging on people's neighborliness. And so if you have something in place that's going to get closer to the property line, people tend to get riled about that too. And so getting into the setback is something I would be very sensitive to. And whether it is a pool deck, whether it is a basketball court, whether it is just a flagstone patio that's pretty tame, again, I'm sensitive to anything within a setback. Some things have to be, like by definition, you have to have your driveway in the setback because you got to get to your house. But except for things like that, okay, you may play field hockey at the end of your driveway, but I'm not getting too excited about that. But the rest of it, I'm sensitive to. Setback issues tend to really get people annoyed.
Well, and that could include patios.
Yes, sir. I would agree with
Dan,
you.
you're arguing that right now, the regulations, your interpretation is that patios can be within the setback.
That's the way I read it.
And
I don't think there's enough language in there to argue it differently.
Well, that's something to think about.
So exactly. So the question for the commission can be, should patios be allowed in the setback or not? And and if the answer is yes, then clarify the regs. And if the answer is no, then clarify the regs.
Right. And it could also be a clarification of the definition of patios, right?
Absolutely.
As either structure or non-structure. If you're going to do a patio that's set in a bed of concrete that has a footing to it, that's attached to a building or attached to a pool structure or pool coping, that's one type. If you're going to do a patio that's essentially open grass pavers that are pervious, that's a whole different type. And maybe the two of them have a different restriction.
And along those same lines, Dan, I was thinking of, when a patio becomes an arbor or a pergola, and then a patio becomes a outdoor fireplace or an outdoor kitchen.
Oh, when you have a structure.
Well, so when does that line start breaking? Is it when it gets above 1.5 feet off the ground? I just wasn't sure if, like, is a knee wall part of, if a patio has a knee wall, is it considered a structure, or is it?
You're allowed, actually, Lynn, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're allowed up to 30 inches in terms of, or 36 inches in terms of a retaining wall? Or do you
Retaining
want-
walls can be up to 4 feet before they need to have their own zoning permit and considered a structure.
So they can be within setbacks.
They're limited within setbacks and they're spelled out that there's a distance to the property line that they have to be in certain zones.
I mean, I'm not necessarily talking about a retaining wall. I'm talking about like, you know, I mean, does it have to be a retaining wall or could it just be like a patio with a wall around it? And that's the same thing. Same thing.
I don't know. Probably not the same thing.
Anyways, some things to consider.
There would be one additional possibility. If the problem is particularly downtown, you might decide that another way to approach this would be not to do a town-wide assessment of all these issues, but simply to do it based on zoning areas and to say that you can't have patios and setbacks in downtown areas.
But it's Kent Turner, but we're agreeing that they would be allowed by special permit. That's my question.
It's a good question because then we could be deluged with special permit requests. My immediate reaction is I'm not sure we'd want to go in that direction. Remember, for example, what did we punt on? We punted on wall sizes, right? Because we were deluged with heights of walls, fences, gates.
Gates,
Gates,
fences,
yeah,
yeah.
gates.
Gates are
We
pillars
punted on that.
gates.
That was the gates. We punted because we were deluged with, so, you know, we just want to think twice before we get too much into minutia.
I remember this happened in zoning board of appeals with, we had all these people wanting to put in generators. We had to improve every generator.
I think we had an application last month which was a sports court and we said it was a tennis. No, it's just a court, it's a patio next to my barn, you know, but he called it a court because to your point, he uses it that way.
Mhm.
But to us, it could have been called a patio.
True.
So guys, exit strategy, one is potentially a recommendation from the planner on whether we should change our drainage policy within the regulations. You all
Yes.
agree with that?
Yes.
And then I think what I'm hearing is maybe we have to think about it. But should patios be allowed in the setback? And related to that, do you try to differentiate, do you try to define a patio and potentially allow permeability within the setback? And
I also think we do it by zone instead of townwide. I think that was like,
That's
I think
true.
Park said that.
okay.
This is more of a smaller lot.
Yeah,
problem,
no,
right?
absolutely, it's a small lot. So are you more, here's my question, are you more liberal or conservative in the smaller lots?
More conservative.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're gonna affect the neighbors.
That might be the
Yeah.
last swimming pool on Church Street for a while. Just saying.
Okay, Lynn? You have marching orders?
Yes, thank
Sufficient
you.
information?
Yes.
Okay, everybody good? Okay, great. One thing I wanted to note, in case anybody missed this, on June 28th, I think it's at 2:00, is the hearing on the Ponus Ridge Cell Tower, if anybody's interested. I think it's 2:00, Lynn, does that sound right?
I believe that's correct.
Okay, and it's going to be here in Town Hall, right? And I assume they're doing a site visit.
Believe they will be.
Yeah, okay. Minutes, April 24, 2022. Any changes to the minutes? Seeing none, do I have motion for approval? Second,
Who made the motion?
Claire. I got it right.
And who's the?
I'm saying it's not great. I assume that we should-
I'll do it next month. I'm doing
I mean, I
that.
like sitting next to Claire. Yeah.
Do I have a second?
I don't think it was working.
Can I have a second, please?
I'll second. All right.
Thank
Second the
you.
Minutes.
Okay, John Goodwin, I vote yes. Ken Turner,
Yes.
Dick Ward.
Yes.
Dan Radman. John Chris.
Yes.
Claire Scornia.
Yes.
Krista Nielsen.
Yes.
Arthur Cassavant.
Yes.
John Engel.
Here, yes.
Okay, Okay, everybody have a great night.
Putting present, okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.